Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 7 abandoned cemeteries with terrifying pasts, we'll wander through forgotten graveyards where headstones crumble, iron gates rust, and silence carries the weight of things left behind. These are chilling accounts of bells that toll without wind, whispers leaking from cracked mausoleums, and footsteps echoing across gravel paths when you know you are utterly alone. This is a new channel, and my goal this month is to reach 3,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers watch and leave without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Subscribe now. Before we begin, share in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there is an abandoned cemetery near your town that unsettles you, type its name. Because once you step through the gates of these forgotten resting grounds, not everything allows you to leave. Kill the lights, silence the world, take a slow breath, and let us begin. I'm not trying to convince you to believe me. I'm just trying to put this somewhere that doesn't live only in my head. If you grew up anywhere near the south suburbs of Chicago, you've heard of Bachelor's Grove. It's one of those places that's always a friend of a friend went there, always at night, always on a dare. Phantom headlights. A woman on a headstone with a bundle in her arms. The pond where they supposedly dumped cars in the 20s. I'd filed all of that away as campfire junk until last fall. This happened in late October, right before Halloween, when the trees are mostly bare and the ground crunches with that thin layer of frost in the mornings. I live in Oak Lawn and work downtown now, but last year I was finishing up a video course at Moraine Valley and interning for a tiny online magazine that did local history pieces. My editor, Mitch, asked if I wanted to do a short documentary about urban legends in Cook County. You get the picture, grab a camera, a couple of friends, talk to a few locals, add moody B-roll. Boom. 5 minutes of sponsored content with a clickbait title. So I pulled in 2 friends I trusted. Maya, who has a calm, practical way of dismantling nonsense, and Dan, who could get audio out of a tin can if he had to. We'd done plenty of assignments together. Abandoned malls, snowstorm coverage, a series on small diner owners. Nothing spooky, nothing serious. I told them we'd hit 3 spots in 1 week. A bridge in Blue Island, a stretch of Archer by Resurrection Cemetery, and Bachelor's Grove. The plan was simple: daylight scouting one day, night shoot the next. Safety in numbers, keep it legal, tell the story without being exploitative. What I didn't say out loud was that Bachelor's Grove had gotten under my skin before we even went. When I mentioned it to my aunt, who's from Alsip, she made a face and said, "Do not mess around in there." My aunt isn't easily rattled. She told me a story about her brother, my Uncle Ray, who drove past the trailhead after midnight in the 80s and saw taillights pull into the forest preserve and then nothing, like a car being swallowed. She said he stopped drinking after that. I laughed because it sounded like 2 different stories glued together. But later, when I tried to look up Uncle Ray in our family photos, I couldn't find a single picture where he was smiling with his teeth. The day we scouted, it was bright, windy, and empty. You park by the trail across from a big bend in the road where the forest preserve fence looks tired. There's this narrow path into the woods hemmed in by scrub trees that lean on you like nosy neighbors. The ground dips and rises weirdly there like you're walking over buried books. The cemetery itself is small, maybe a couple dozen stones left upright, most of them tipped or broken. The place feels like it's trying to return to dirt and the trees are just waiting for you to turn your back. We didn't bring anything heavy on the scout. Just a phone, a handheld camera, and Dan's pocket recorder. Maya had on a bright yellow beanie like she always does when we're outdoors. We stepped off the main path and it felt like stepping into a room that's been closed for a long time. The sounds shift. You think the highway will follow you in, but the trees catch the wind and you hear water from somewhere you can't see. And your own breath is suddenly loud. "This is a bad place for a cemetery," Maya said, reading the ground the way she does. Everything tilts. It moves. "Legend says gangsters used to dump bodies in the pond," Dan said, mostly to hear the recorder capture his voice. "And the white lady, she—" "Don't start," Maya said. "You'll give him ideas." I joked something about gangsters needing better GPS. We walked around. I got shots of names so old the letters fell off in flakes. There were pennies and a plastic rosary on one of the stones, and a grocery store bouquet jammed into the mud, the plastic rattling in the wind. A few beer caps here and there, a cigarette butt, a melted candle. We didn't see anyone else. We left before sunset. That night I reviewed the footage and felt embarrassed by my own setup shots. You could hear me narrating in my trying to be NPR voice. I almost texted Mitch to say we should skip Bachelor's Grove and do something else, like that statue in Evergreen Park that people claim cries. But then I figured my unease was exactly the point. People love being creeped out in the safety of their living rooms. I told myself we'd follow the plan and be done. The night shoot was 2 days later. We started late. Traffic downtown had been brutal, and by the time I got back to Oak Lawn and picked up Maya and Dan, the sun was already gone. We grabbed flashlights, extra batteries, a tripod, mics, and a paper bag of Dunkin' that nobody touched. The temperature had dropped hard. You could see your breath. The stars were clear and the moon was a thin thing getting swallowed by racing clouds. There was already a car pulled over near the trailhead when we got there. A white sedan idling in the shoulder, like it wasn't sure if it wanted to commit. As we slowed behind it, it pulled away fast and vanished around the curve. I clocked the tail end of the license plate without meaning to. 784 or 874, I think. We parked on the opposite side and crossed carefully with the gear. You can tell yourself 100 times that it's just a patch of woods with old stones. It doesn't matter when you're standing there, toes on the dark path, the air colder by degrees as you step off asphalt. The wind had calmed and all the sounds were small. Dead leaves twitching. Something dripping. Our voices felt like they didn't belong. Okay, I said. No screwing around. We get what we need and we go. Maya nodded and clipped the little light to her jacket. If I say we're leaving, we leave. Dan grinned like he'd just heard the premise of a good prank. Copy that, Captain. The path looked different at night. What seemed short in daylight stretched on. Our flashlights picked out pieces of the world but left the rest to fill itself in. We passed the cut in the fence where people sneak through, climbed, ducked, and then we were in. The cemetery sits like a shallow bowl with stones sticking up like teeth. There's a chain strung between a few posts that mean nothing. My breath came in clouds and floated toward the names. We set up quick. Dan put the recorder on a flat portion of granite with coins glued to it by frozen dew. I set the tripod near the least tipped stone that still had legible writing. Maya stayed between us and the path, sweeping the tree line with her light like she expected someone to be hiding there. I started my spiel, a quick intro about folklore, gangsters, and rumored sightings. The woman with a bundle, the car that appears and disappears on the road out front. I said all of it lightly because that's how you keep the air thin. It would have stayed a weird school night shoot if not for the second car. It started with the sound of gravel. The road out front is paved, but the shoulder is rough and you hear it when a car pulls over. We killed our lights and crouched without talking. You don't want to get fined. You don't want to get yelled at by a cop or worse, hassled by people looking for trouble. The noise stopped. I waited for a door slam that didn't come. No headlights washed the tops of the trees. Maybe they just slowed down, I whispered. Maya shook her head and pointed toward the part of the fence we'd climbed. The moon slipped free of a cloud, and in that pale light we all saw it. The faint outline of a car sitting on the shoulder where we'd parked earlier. Except not exactly there. The outline was off. Wrong scale maybe, or wrong angle. It looked like someone had left a memory parked there. No interior lights, no reflections, no movement. Then a darker cloud swallowed the moon again and there was nothing but black and distance. We're not cops, Dan said softly, into no one in particular. You're not funny, Maya said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was the kind of steady that comes after anger. We worked faster. I did a second take. Dan recorded ambient sound, then did that thing he does where he asks empty air to give us a sign because the audience likes that even if I don't. Who's out here with us? He said. You can speak into this. He tapped the recorder, gentle like you'd tap a sleeping kid. Silence. Then the smallest noise. Not a word. More like the gentle creak of something that shouldn't be moving. A hinge, a wet branch pulling free. It came from the direction of the pond. If you haven't been to Bachelor's Grove, the pond is only a short walk from the stones, down a thin track that glitters with broken glass and beer cans. We hadn't planned to shoot there at night. There are places where the ground trickles out from under you like the cemetery is trying to eat your feet, and there's a rusted bit of old fence lying flat that loves to bite ankles. But the noise came again, so soft we might have imagined it, and I knew that if I ignored it, Mitch would ask later why I didn't go check. We'll be quick, I said. Just to the edge. We stayed close, all three lights barely slicing the trees. The smell changed as we walked, colder, metallic like wet pennies. The trail dipped and opened to the pond. which was darker than the surrounding dark, perfectly flat except where something ticked against the skin of the water. The far bank was just a smudge. Our lights skated off it like the pond had learned to refuse. "It sounds like glass," Maya said. The ticking continued, a little irregular. Dan panned the recorder slowly. I was thinking about old stories of headlights that move underwater like cars breathing. My annoyance at myself grew a tale of fear that tugged when I moved. We weren't alone. You know how you can feel people even when you can't see them? There was that. Not a moving crowd, not feet, just a pressure like several heads turned at once to listen back. It wasn't supernatural. It was the way animals look up from a field when your shoe crunches, except we were the animals and the field was watching. "Guys," Maya said and pointed at the ground near the waterline. Her light caught a shoe print. Not fresh, but not old either. Deep heel. Edges still holding their shape where mud had frozen around it. Another print. And beside it something smaller, soft-edged, the kind you get when a child steps in wet ground that firms up afterward. "I hate this," Dan said. "I thought you were the one who—" I started, and then stopped because every part of the pond went still. Like someone laying a palm over a mouth. The ticking ended. The flat water went flatter somehow, emptier, like a held breath. My own breath clattered in my chest. A faint light moved across the surface, not over it, under it. Slow. It started at our left, drifted toward the center, and winked out like it had remembered another errand elsewhere. I didn't say anything because the words in my throat were the wrong size to get out. Then from behind us, back toward the stones, came a single crisp sound of metal touching metal, like an old car door catch being eased closed. We were moving before we talked about moving. Dan scooped his recorder. Maya's light skittered off the pond and into the trees, jumping until she got the trail. The walk back was longer. The ground pushed at our heels. The air felt stitched too tight. The cemetery bowl showed itself again, and something about it was different. At first I thought it was just my heart beating in my ears. Then I realized that my tripod, left by the upright stone, was a few inches to the left of where I'd put it, tilted, as if someone had bumped it gently with a hip, and then politely straightened it. The coins on the flat granite were rearranged in a line. You can argue we misremembered, that the wind did it, but the coins were wet and heavy and the wind would have had to grow fingers. Maya shone her light across the nearest stones. There are names out there that used to be farms, families that got swallowed by other names and leases, and the kind of time that isn't measured by clocks. On one of the stones, perched like a bird waiting for a train, sat a small folded blanket. It wasn't there earlier. It was the kind of blanket you give a newborn. Yellow with a little row of stitched animals. It wasn't wet. It wasn't dirty. It was just there, gently folded, occupying the exact center of the stone as if it belonged there and always had. "Okay," I said, voice all wrong. "Nope." Maya said nothing, but I felt her hand take the back of my jacket in a way that said move and don't run at the same time. Dan, because he is Dan and because fate loves a boy who can't resist a sound, clicked the recorder on and held it close. "Who left this?" he asked softly. "Do you want us to—" He didn't finish because someone stepped onto the path behind us. Not a full footstep. Just the sound you get when weight touches leaves and finds its place. It's a very particular sound. Half sigh, half crackle. It came from 10 feet away, then from 6. Then from a distance that made the hairs on the back of my neck pull at the skin. But our lights, when we turned them there, found only the old split in the fence, a line of tree trunks, and the dark road beyond. We weren't alone. But we were alone in the way that makes you careful with your breathing. There was not someone. There was the idea of someone. I reached for the tripod and my fingers couldn't remember how to close. We backed up. The blanket sat there politely. Dan spoke again, but into the wrong air. "We're leaving," he said. "Sorry." On our way out, the world threw one more thing at us. We reached the fence cut, bent to climb, and just then the road filled with lights from the right. Headlights full on, roaring bright. I threw up my arm and the beam painted my palm bones. A horn blatted a short, angry warning. I thought we were about to die. I stepped backward, tripped on the chain someone had strung between 2 fake posts, and braced for metal. The light slid past and away. No engine sound. No tire hiss. Only light, and then no light. It was like someone took a pair of flashlights, stood on the road, and pushed them along at 40 miles an hour with their hands. After it, the darkness snapped back. We made it to the car in a shape that looked like 3 people walking, but was really just 3 stacks of unspoken agreements. Don't run, don't look back, don't speak until there's a door between us and that place. The sedan we'd seen earlier was gone. Our car felt strange, like it had been rifled through by polite raccoons. Nothing missing, but the glove box was crooked and the interior light hesitated, then came on. We pulled out. I glanced at the shoulder, forcing a last look, and saw the faint gray suggestion of a car parked where there was no car, sitting at a crooked angle like it had time-traveled wrong. Then the curve took it and we were on the main road, and the forest preserve bled back into regular trees and chain-link fences and the feeling that we'd survived a prank. Nobody talked for a few minutes. The heater clicked in my car like it always does. Maya eventually breathed out and said, "Don't make me go back." "Never," I said. I meant it. At a stoplight, Dan held the recorder up with a sick kind of curiosity. "Want to hear?" "Not here," Maya said. "Not now. Wait until there's other noise. Music, people, walls." We ended up at a 24-hour diner off Cicero because bright lights and coffee felt like an antidote. The waitress called us honey and didn't look at our faces too closely. The drunk guys in the corner laughed at nothing, which felt comfortable, like a sitcom you've seen 100 times. We traded jokes and relief. We watched the Cubs highlights on the TV with the volume off. When the coffee came, it was too hot to drink. Dan couldn't wait. He fiddled with the recorder under the table and slid on his headphones. He's good at keeping his face neutral, but you could see something crawl over it as he listened. Not fear yet. Something like confusion stretching itself to try on fear's jacket. "Okay," he said, pulling one ear cup back. "Listen to this. It's just after I ask if anyone's out there." He held the headphones out. I put them on. The recorder is good at picking up details. Moth wings, jacket zippers, the tremor in your voice you don't want to admit is there. I heard us breathing. I heard a leaf settle. I heard my own voice earlier talk about the pond. Silence, then a tiny sound like a joint being eased. Then words, no, not words. Word-shaped air. The kind of sound you'd make if you forgot how to speak halfway through remembering. It wasn't big. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of small sound that hits you harder than a scream because it's familiar and impossible at the same time. It sounded like someone trying to say, "Don't," but with their mouth full of water. I took the headphones off fast enough to make the band slap the table. Coffee jumped in cups. Maya flinched and swore quietly. "There's more," Dan said, voice low. He scrubbed forward. "When we were at the pond, listen." I said I didn't want to. Then I listened. It was the pond, but not how it had felt to stand there. The recorder made the space bigger. It collected silence like a tax. The ticking on the water was there and something else under it. Not the light, that wouldn't make sound, but something that the light might have belonged to. A soft electrical thrum that rose and fell like a heart, faint and wrong for the setting. Like a hospital sound smuggled into a forest on a night when no one had their phones out. Then, further in the track, after we'd returned to the stones and before we noticed the blanket, the recorder caught a breath that didn't belong to any of us. It wasn't close to the mic. It wasn't human the way I mean when I say human. It was careful. It was deliberate. It was the sound a person makes when they don't want anyone to know they're standing behind you, a little to your right, holding something they don't want to set down. We stopped listening. The diner's fluorescent hum snapped back in. The waitress gave us a refill we didn't ask for. Maya stared at the salt shaker like it had the answers. Dan shut off the recorder and put it in his backpack the way you put a dead phone into a drawer, slow and respectably. I had to deliver something to Mitch, and I knew there was no way I was going to fake it. I cut the footage into a rough with no voiceover, no music, just footage of the stones and our footsteps and the pond, the blanket. I left out the lights on the road because they'd look like bad editing, or worse, like us trying to make it scarier. I sent Mitch the link and then turned off my laptop and sat in my dark living room, listening to the radiator pretend it was rain. He didn't respond until the next morning. "Good stuff," he wrote. "But the blanket feels cheesy. Did you bring that? If not, we can cut it. Also, do you have a license plate on that sedan from your first shot for legal?" He sent a timestamp. It was the moment when the white car had pulled away as we arrived. I scrubbed to the frame he meant. There was a car there in my memory. In the footage, there was nothing. Not even the ghost of taillights. Just the empty curve and the fence and the space where you could maybe imagine a silhouette if you wanted to. I felt my stomach shift like someone had pulled the rug. I rewatched it close and slow and there was nothing to rewind. The car wasn't there because the camera said so. And the camera rarely lies unless you make it. I told Mitch we'd get more B-roll of the road later. I didn't say I wasn't going back. That afternoon, I drove to my aunt's house with the audio file on my phone. I wanted someone older to tell me I had misheard. She listened with her eyes half closed and flinched at the same spots we had. When it ended, she set the phone down on a stack of mail and looked at me like I was a photo of myself at a younger age. "Your Uncle Ray used to pick up shifts out near there," she said. "Back when he was doing deliveries for that bottling plant. He told me once that on certain nights he'd slow down near the entrance because he thought he saw a car pulled over. Like someone broke down. He said he always felt bad for not stopping. But then when he'd get to the shoulder, it wasn't there. And when he looked in the mirror, it was there again, and he decided whoever it was didn't need him." "He stopped drinking after that?" I asked, trying to keep it light. "He stopped talking about certain things," she said. "Sometimes that's the same as drinking. Be careful with your eyes. If you ever see something that looks like it wants you to look again, don't." Driving home, I passed a car on the shoulder a few blocks from my place. One of those old sedans with the long back end you don't see much anymore. It was parked crooked, one tire in the grass, like someone had eased it to a stop and then changed their mind about everything. I slowed because you can't not. The interior light was on. There was no one inside. I didn't stop. I started sleeping with a pillow over my head. It made no difference. You can't ignore certain ideas once they've learned your address. The recorder stayed in Dan's backpack for a week. He said he didn't want it near his bed. When we finally sat down to review again for the edit, we found something new. Between the breath and the metal latch sound, there was a whisper we hadn't noticed under the noise of the diner. We only caught it because we were listening with the volume up at the lab on decent monitors. It wasn't a word. It was the start of one. A letter. The whisper of the letter B, blown gently as if to begin baby or blanket or back. We never finished the piece the way we planned. Mitch got antsy and told us to turn in what we had. He ran it with a clickbait title anyway. The comments were what you'd expect. Fake. My cousin saw the lady in white. Stop disrespecting the dead. Sound at 2:47, what is that? One guy posted a blurry photo of himself in the cemetery at night and said he'd slept on a headstone and nothing happened. Another person insisted we had staged the blanket. I didn't argue. The video did fine. The sponsor paid. I got my school credit, but little things followed us. A week later, Maya called me in the middle of the night just to hear another human voice. She said she'd woken to the smell of the pond, cold and metallic, so strong it felt like a sheet laid over the bed. She had checked every faucet, every pipe. The smell had faded when she turned on her bedside lamp. It came back when she turned it off. She slept with it on until sunrise. "I still have sand in my shoes," she said. But I didn't go to the beach. Dan texted me a photo the next day. A smear inside his windshield he couldn't scrub off. It showed up in the morning like a fingerprint, low on the passenger side. Not his. He tried Windex, vinegar, a razor blade. It dimmed, then came back stronger. It looked almost like someone had pressed a small damp palm there from the inside. You could see the little crescent of a thumbnail. He started putting a towel over it when he drove. I hadn't had anything weird happen, unless you count what happened at the light on 95th, which I didn't tell them about because it sounded dumb even in my head. Every time I stopped there after dark, whether it was a red or a slow left with the arrow, I'd catch a flicker in the side mirror, headlights behind me. Not brights, just a pair of low beams humming along at the exact speed of my exhale. When I checked over my shoulder, there was never a car. The mirror would insist until the light changed, and then everything was normal again, except the world felt one layer thinner. You expect the ending here to be big. You expect someone to vanish or a name to appear on a stone that matches your own. That's not what happened. This isn't a movie. This is just me telling you something true the way my mouth can manage it. 2 weeks after the video went up, I got a message from an account with a name like a license plate, a jumble of letters and numbers. The message had no text, just a photo. It was taken from inside a car, looking out through a windshield at a stretch of road I recognized immediately. The curve by the trailhead, the tired forest preserve fence, the little shoulder where you can pull over if you're brave or bored or very, very lost. It was dusk in the photo, blue light, no headlights yet. There was a white sedan parked badly. The taillights were on but dim, like a heart after a long run. In the rear window, reflected faintly, there was a shape like a folded blanket on a passenger seat. The license plate was visible but smeared by motion. The numbers I thought I remembered, 784 or 874, were both there if you looked long enough. If you let your eyes rewrite what they wanted to read, I didn't reply. I blocked the account. Then I sat in my kitchen with the lights off and listened to the slow, careful breathing of my building. Old pipes, somebody else's TV, the winter stretching ahead. I thought foolishly about burning the recorder, like it was a cursed object in a dumb movie. I thought about driving back to the cemetery in daylight, setting the blanket, if it was still there, neatly on the ground and telling the air we were sorry. I thought about never speaking of it again. I didn't go back. Not because I'm brave or because I learned any lesson. I didn't go back because I believe what my aunt said. Be careful with your eyes. If something wants you to look twice, don't. A month later, Mitch ran a follow-up piece with reader-submitted stories. People wrote in about headlights with no cars, about the sense of standing in a small crowd where no one speaks, about a woman who sits on a stone with something bundled in her arms and hums without making sound. They wrote like I am now, careful and a little ashamed of their sentences. One woman said she parked by the trail at dusk and closed her eyes and felt someone place weight on the hood of her car, gentle as a cat. When she opened them, the hood was empty, but the paint was dented by something small enough to cradle. Sometimes I drive past that bend because that's how you get from where I live to where I work. Sometimes I go out of my way just to avoid it. It doesn't matter. The place is patient. It doesn't need you to show up to remember you. The trees there lean a little closer. The path is always a little too narrow, like it wants you in single file. The pond is always holding its place like a mouth that's learned to keep a secret. And lately, when I sit at red lights, I practice not checking my mirrors. I watch the cross traffic. I watch the pedestrians. I count their steps. I let the light change me without looking back. It's not easy. There's a habit the eyes have. They like to confirm what they already know. When I do slip, when I lift my eyes to the glass and let that old instinct win, I see, just for the length of a blink, a pair of headlights floating behind my car at the exact height of possibility. They don't glare. They don't crowd. They only keep pace. And if I stare long enough, they pull apart into two separate brightnesses that could be anything. Porch lights on a house that never existed, a pair of candles in someone's careful hands, or the reflection, dim and gentle, of a woman sitting on a tombstone, cradling something you should never ask to see. If you go to Bachelor's Grove, you might see nothing. You might sit on a headstone and laugh and be fine. You might bring a blanket and leave it behind without remembering why you unfolded it. You might hear a door catch ease itself closed a few times in the dark and think it's your nerves. You might glance up at the road and see a car that isn't going to help you, idling with the patience of a story that isn't finished yet. You can tell yourself you're different, that you don't believe in things that lurk just off the shoulder. You can say it's a trick of the light, a coincidence of weather, a recorder picking up static from somewhere it shouldn't. I said all those things to myself, and most days they work. Most days the city is loud and the trains are late and everything obvious crowds in, and you don't have time to be haunted. But there are nights when I wash my cup and set it upside down to dry and I hear the faintest tap of metal touching metal from the hallway or the stairwell, like an old latch remembering how it used to hold. There are nights when the smell of wet pennies finds me even though the windows are closed. There are nights when I dream about that folded blanket in the exact center of the old stone, and wake with the weight of something small resting in the crook of my arm that isn't there when I turn on the light. If you're looking for advice, I don't have much. Stay out of the woods at night. Leave what you find. If a place teaches you to keep your eyes forward, listen. And if you ever see headlights in your mirror that don't cast a car when you look back, don't try to figure it out. Don't be brave. Don't be curious. Just breathe like you're in a room you don't want to wake and wait for the light to change. Then go, don't look twice. Don't give the story another glance. It doesn't need your help finishing. It knows the way. It knows the turn. It knows exactly how long to ride your bumper before it lets you go. I'm not the kind of person who goes looking for trouble, and I swear I wasn't trying to mock anything that night. I grew up in Kansas. I know the difference between dumb dares and the kind of stories you're supposed to leave alone. This one, I wish we had left it alone. This happened a few years ago, late October. I was 22, going to school in Lawrence, working part-time delivering sandwiches on the night shift. The college town energy had already started to thin out into that gray, windy stretch before winter hits. On weekends, if you drove 30 minutes west, the landscape turned into big pieces of nothing. Fields, leaning fences, the occasional light from a farm kitchen. The kind of emptiness that makes you feel like your car's headlights are a little circle in a giant dark lake. My friend Jamie had a car and a taste for YouTube horror channels. If there's a video with true story or found footage in the title, she's seen it twice. Mark, my roommate, pretended he didn't care, but he remembered every detail. One night we were watching some narrator talk about the most haunted places in the Midwest, and the video brought up Abandoned Cemetery. The 7 gateways to hell place, the one with the church that supposedly had a staircase that goes down too far. People say the devil shows up there twice a year and the Pope wouldn't let his plane fly over it. If you're from Kansas, you've heard some version of those lines since you were a kid. I had, and I always filed it under corny legend adults tell teenagers to keep them from partying in graveyards. The video ended. Jamie turned to me and Mark with that look that meant, "Do you want to see if the ghost is real?" Mark snorted. "We'll be back by midnight," he said. "It's on the way to nothing." I want to say I argued. I didn't. I thought it'd be a drive, maybe a creepy selfie, the kind of thing you laugh about when you're old. But there was something else too. I had a reason to want to leave the apartment that night. 2 weeks before, my dad had a small stroke. He was okay physically, but he sounded different on the phone, like his sentences were missing the last button. In the quiet moments that fall, I kept hearing people I loved turn into someone else, and it scared me more than ghosts. When Mark said we'd be back by midnight, I thought, good. A road, some dumb history, come home, go back to normal. We left at 10:18 p.m., I remember the time, because Jamie took a photo of the dashboard clock and put it on her story with the caption, "Field Trip." She wore a beanie jammed down over her eyebrows. Mark had a thermos of gas station coffee and the attitude of a guy driving to an oil change. I sat in the back with a blanket because the heater in Jamie's Corolla took years to wake up. The wind had been steady all day, but when we hit the county roads, it got weirdly stronger in the open space. You could feel it lean against the car like a flat palm. The sky was clouded but not solid. The moon kept shouldering through the mess, then hiding again. We passed a lot of nothing. Twice we saw coyotes far off in a field, just shapes that stopped and looked at the sound of the engine. We almost missed the turn. The road sign for Stull Road was twisted, and the letters had a shine like they'd been repainted badly. Jamie slowed down and said, "If we get a flat, I'm setting the car on fire for warmth." There's not much town to Stull. A handful of houses, some outbuildings, a church that isn't a church anymore. We weren't planning to trespass. We just wanted to see the place and leave. We'd talked about that. In and out. Be respectful. No stupid jokes. We pulled up across from the cemetery. The gate wasn't locked, which surprised me. I remembered hearing it used to be fenced off because people kept vandalizing it. The chain was looped in a way that made it look locked until you touched it. Mark reached out and the chain came loose in his hand. He froze and looked at me like he'd been caught breaking something by accident. The wind pushed his hair back. The only sound was the flag on a pole at the little township building cracking in the air. "I don't like that," Jamie said, pointing at the chain. We parked on the shoulder by a ditch. Every part of me expected a sheriff's cruiser to roll up and light us with blue and red. It didn't happen. When we got out, the wind smacked my ears and made my eyes water. It was colder than in town and felt like an empty auditorium. You know that hush you get in a big space? It was that, only outside we went in. Jamie used her phone flashlight like a spotlight, sweeping it over headstones. They weren't fancy stones. A lot of them were low and old, with names and dates worn down to suggestions. There was a newer section too, closer to the gravel path that cut along the edge. You could tell the relatives still came there. Plastic flowers pressed flat, wind-tilted flags in little holders. A small ceramic angel with a broken wing and dirt crusted in its hair. I kept catching myself reading names. I wasn't trying to. It was like my eyes couldn't help it. Sarah, 1902-1927, Michael, infant son. There was one little stone no bigger than a brick with a lamb carved into it. Someone had tucked a baseball next to it that had gone brown and fuzzy in the seams. Maybe I'm isolating details because you're supposed to understand why we didn't immediately run away. But that's how it felt. Ordinary loss. Unfair and everywhere. Not a gate to anything. We spent a few minutes like that, being quiet, making dumb comments to keep the silence from getting too real. When we got to the part that I guess used to be the church, I felt the ground change. It's hard to explain. The grass stopped. There was this rectangle of stones laying flush with the soil like a foundation. I'd seen pictures of the church back when it still stood. A ruin with no roof. People say it got torn down years ago. Now it was just the outline, like a chalk drawing of a building. Mark hopped up on the stones and said, "Stage is set." He tapped his foot, then stopped. "Feel that?" "What?" Jamie asked. He bounced again. He's not heavy, but you could hear something under the stone, a dull drum. Not hollow exactly. Just not dirt. I didn't want to stand on it. I don't know why. I stayed on the border grass. Jamie walked around the rectangle like she was inspecting it, then aimed her light at the middle and whispered, "No way." At first I thought it was a shadow. Her light wasn't strong, and the moon was in the way half the time. But the beam caught edges. We all stepped closer at the same time like we'd been pulled. There was a square in the stone, a hatch, metal with a ring handle that lay flat. It looked newer than the stones, but not new. Like it had been there a long time and nobody had taken care of it, but the material held. "I thought they sealed it," Mark said. "Didn't they pour concrete when they knocked the church down?" "Maybe it's a septic thing," I said. "Or a storm shelter." We stood there and didn't touch it. The wind quieted for a second. I know how that reads. The wind quieted, but it did. The flag noise stopped. The trees went still. It was like the whole place took a breath with us and held it. Jamie put her phone away. "If there's one night I'm not opening weird square holes," she said, trying to sound flippant. "It's this one." "Agreed," I said. Mark crouched, though. He just looked. He wasn't reaching for the ring. He was studying the seam, the way the metal lip sat over the stone. Maybe he wanted to be the guy who saw and didn't flinch. He tilted his head, and as soon as his ear got near the surface, he jerked back like he'd been touched. He scrambled to his feet and bumped into me. When he spoke, his voice came out thin. "There's something—" He shook his head. "Like, I can't—" "It's not a sound. It's pressure." Jamie's eyes were big. "Let's go," she said. Not a joke now. She was already stepping backward, turning her light away from the hatch like it was bright. Then we heard a car. It wasn't a sheriff. It was an old pickup coasting slow down the road, a shape with 2 square lights. We all had the exact same thought. We're about to get yelled at by a local who's sick of kids making messes. The truck stopped next to our Corolla. The driver didn't get out. He rolled down his window. The cab was dark, and the angle of his interior light did that thing where their face stays shadowed. I could make out a brim of a cap. "You kids all right?" the man called. His voice wasn't angry. He sounded like someone checking if your tire's flat. "We're just leaving," Jamie said a little too quickly. "Good plan," he said. "Gate's a pain when the wind hits it. Don't forget to hook it." Jamie nodded and started moving toward the gate. Mark and I followed fast. It felt like every footstep was too loud. I don't know why. The man looked over at the cemetery, not like he was afraid of it. More like a person glancing at a porch he'd known his whole life. "You from Lawrence?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Mark said. The man nodded like he'd guessed. "Watch the ditch," he said. "It drops more than you think." He didn't introduce himself. He didn't tell us a story. He just watched us loop the chain around the post. Jamie hooked it the way it had been, loose. "You probably want to lock that," she said, trying to hand the chain to the man like it was his. He smiled, I think. It was hard to see. "People around here know better than to lock people in," he said. "You have a good night." He rolled his window up and drove off before we could say thanks. No drama, no lecture. He turned east and was gone. I remember the taillights shrinking like eyes closing. We got back into Jamie's car. The heater had finally started to work, and the warmth made me realize how cold my hands were. Jamie started the engine. Mark was quiet, looking in the side mirror at the dark field. "That guy felt normal," he said, like he was making a case. "That's good." "Yeah," I said. Jamie pulled out. The road curved and the cemetery slid away on our right. As we passed the township building, I saw a glass notice case with a poster about a chili supper pinned inside. The date was 2 weeks ago. Nothing strange about that. People don't take down signs right away. We'd gone maybe a mile when Jamie said, "What time is it?" I checked my phone. 10:22 p.m. "We were there longer than 4 minutes," she said. "Maybe the clock's wrong," Mark said, but he checked his phone too. 10:22 p.m. The dashboard clock said 10:21. We had receipts. We had a photo of the time we left. It should have been almost 11. It wasn't funny. It wasn't even that weird, practically, but my stomach did a small turn and I found myself watching the white line on the shoulder, like it was something that could change. "Maybe we parked earlier than we thought," I said. No one answered. We passed a house with a porch light. A dog barked. There was a shape in the window, maybe someone in a chair. Those 2 seconds felt so normal I almost forgot the hatch. Then Jamie's phone vibrated in the cup holder, and the screen lit her face. "What?" she said. "Who's calling me?" She flipped it over. "No caller ID," she said, and hit decline. It rang again. Same thing. She declined again. It rang a third time and she let it go. It stopped. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw the same block of words. "No caller ID, I'm not answering," I said. "Don't," Mark said. The wind hit the car again. The sound went up and down like a ceiling fan with one loose blade. We drove, no more calls. Jamie turned the radio on and a talk station came through with a preacher quoting something. Then it dissolved into static and popped back as an ad for a lawn service. Normal weird because Kansas radio at night is like that. We hit 59 and the lights of Lawrence appeared way off as a glow. That feeling of the air changing when you get near a town made me breathe out without realizing I'd been tight. Jamie shook her head and laughed once, shaky. "We're dumb," she said. "We're fine." "Yeah," Mark said. "We're fine." When we got back to the apartment, we did what people do when they want to call a night normal. We left the overhead lights off and turned the kitchen lamp on and made popcorn. By midnight, we were actually laughing. The hatch became this detail we kept explaining to ourselves. Some weird maintenance thing. A prank. They sealed the church. Everyone knows that. The first thing that got me again was Jamie's Instagram story. I'm not big on posting, but she is. So when she started going through her photos to put up a picture of the dark fence and a stone, she froze. "That's not funny," she said. She turned her phone toward us. The last photo in the camera roll wasn't the dashboard clock. It was a shot of the hatch. From above, flash on, framed too neatly to be an accident. The ring handle was centered and glinting. Our shoes weren't in the frame. There was no motion blur. It looked composed. "I didn't take that," she said, voice high. Mark reached for his phone like he could check something at the same time. He opened his camera roll, scrolled, then stopped. He had the same photo, same angle, same flash, same framing, but 2 tiny differences. On his version, the ring handle was turned about 15 degrees to the right. On Jamie's, it was straight. And mine, when I finally checked, hands stupid with popcorn oil, I had the photo too. In mine, the ring handle was turned 1 notch left. We stared at the 3 pictures side by side in the kitchen light. Same dirt crumbs, same hairline scratch on the metal that curved like a question mark. Just that handle, which looked shallow but made my throat go tight, because it meant they weren't identical. It meant something. "Okay," Mark said, trying to crack a joke and failing. "Someone's messing with us." "Nobody's in here, Mark," Jamie said. "We've been together since we got back." She locked her phone and set it face down like it could look back. We could have deleted them. We didn't. Part of me was stubborn. Part of me wanted proof that I wasn't just letting my brain run around. We put the phones away and forced ourselves to watch something stupid. Around 1:30 a.m., Mark yawned and said he was going to bed. "My roommate's at his girlfriend's," he said to Jamie as he stood up. "You can crash in my room if you don't want to drive." "I'll take the couch. I'm okay," she said. "Text me when you wake up tomorrow so I know you didn't get dragged under the bed." We laughed. The kind of laugh that doesn't clear anything. She left around 1:45. I watched from the window to make sure she got to her car. She waved, headlights cut across the walls, and she was gone. I brushed my teeth and was scrolling out of habit. That numb swipe until your eyes sting. And then my phone buzzed. A voicemail. No caller ID again. No ring this time. Just the voicemail notification. The timestamp was 1:58 a.m. I put my thumb on the message and hit play. I was expecting silence and a click. I got silence first, then a sound like someone set a phone on a rough surface. Gravel. Sharper than that, though. Stone on metal. There was wind. Not in the microphone way, more like a pressure change. The silence stretched until I was sure there was nothing else. Then I heard two things, very faint. Footsteps not on dirt but on stone. And my voice, clear. The way you always hate hearing your own voice when it's recorded. I said, "Don't, that's all." The voicemail ended. My first thought was that one of my friends had recorded me outside without telling me and was being an idiot. But it didn't match. The footsteps on stone, the way the wind sat. The thing that made me put the phone face down was that "don't" wasn't from tonight. It was from when we were at the hatch and Mark leaned in. I said "don't" quietly. I hadn't realized until I heard it played back that I had. You ever listen to something and feel your memory rearranged to make room for it? I didn't sleep that night, obviously. The room felt too bright and too dark at the same time, like it does when you're sick. At some point near morning, I put on a hoodie and went outside and sat on the concrete steps that faced the parking lot. The sun came up the way it always does, small then big. The world looked ridiculous under it. Cars like toys, a guy with a goofy dog, the neighbor girl with her backpack. Ordinary life on top of whatever that had been. Mark came out around 8, rubbing his eyes, hair sticking up. He saw me and made this face like, "So we're going to talk about it or pretend we're normal?" We decided on normal first. We went to the bagel place. We kept reaching for our phones and not showing each other what was on them. At noon, Jamie texted both of us. "Call me when you can," she wrote. We called. She didn't say hello. "It's gone," she said. "The photo, it's gone." "What do you mean?" Mark asked. "I didn't delete it. I went to show my roommate, and it's not there. There's a blank in the camera roll, not a black square, not a corrupted thing. The numbers jump from 4:13 to 4:15. The timestamp is still there if I scroll fast enough. 10:25 p.m. But there's no picture." Mark checked, and his was still there. I checked, and mine was still there. "Come over," Mark said. "We'll figure it out." We didn't figure it out. Jamie came over and we did the obvious things. We restarted our phones. We looked through hidden albums. We searched by time. Nothing. Hers was gone like it had never existed. Around 2 p.m., there was a knock on our apartment door. I opened it and found a man in his 60s standing there holding a clipboard. He had that small-town handyman look. Sun-wrinkled. New cap with an old logo. Behind him was a woman around the same age wearing a KU sweatshirt under a denim jacket, hands tucked in the sleeves. The man smiled like he didn't want to bother anyone. "I'm sorry to drop in," he said. "But are you the young folks who were out by Stull last night?" I felt every part of me go hot. "We were just driving," I said. "We didn't," he held up a hand. "Not scolding you," he said. "I'm with the township. My niece works at the Casey's and saw your friend's story." He nodded at Jamie. "Recognize the road?" Jamie turned pink and managed a nod. "We're trying to keep people from going out there and getting stuck in the ditch," he said. "It's nothing but trouble for everyone. Just wanted to make sure you're okay." "We're fine," Mark said. "We didn't touch anything." The man looked relieved, like he wanted to like us and was looking for a reason to. The woman beside him spoke up. "You didn't move the stones, right?" she asked, like it mattered a lot. "No," Jamie said. "Good," the woman said. "Don't move things there." She looked at me and something in her eyes made me look down. Not angry, not superstitious, tired. The man nodded. "If you want to go look at history, there's other places," he said. "There's a Civil War site not far. People don't get in trouble there." He hesitated. "If you saw anything, I don't want to know. That's between you and your night." He took a breath. "But if you go again, don't, okay?" "We won't," I said. And I meant it. They left. They were normal. That word kept feeling important. They had clipboards and jackets, and they stood the way people stand when they've been talking to teenagers for years. When the door closed, we exhaled at the same time like a cartoon. "I hate that the nice version is worse," Jamie said quietly. "I wish he yelled at us." That week, little things stacked up. Nothing big enough to show a cop. Nothing movie-worthy. But enough to make the daylight feel shorter. Every night around 1:58 a.m., a voicemail popped up from no caller ID. It was never longer than 20 seconds. Always wind and that shifting gravel on metal sound. Sometimes a breath. Once a faint hum that might have been a fragment of a hymn if you wanted to be scared. Sometimes again, footsteps on stone. I stopped playing them on speaker. I stopped playing them at all. That didn't stop me from feeling them arrive like a pressure change in the room. The phone lit, the time read 1:58. I stared. I put it face down. It wasn't just me. Mark got them. Jamie got them again after a day of silence. On the third night, Jamie texted at 2:01, "New one is just rain?" Mark responded, "Not raining." It wasn't. We held our phones up to the window like that would force the sky to match. On Wednesday, I woke to find the hallway light on. I hadn't turned it on. Mark hadn't either. It was the kind of light you leave on when you're waiting for someone. I turned it off and it clicked, a small mechanical sound that made me feel watched. On Thursday, I walked out to my car after class and found grit on the hood. Not dust, granular chips of something. I brushed them into my palm and looked. Little gray flecks. Stone? Concrete? When I got into the car and started it, the radio came on mid-sentence with a preacher again, and I shut it off too fast. We decided to talk to someone. Not a priest, not a ghost hunter. We picked boring help. We went back to that Casey's in the afternoon because we knew the niece worked there, and we figured she'd point us to someone without making a big deal out of it. She was stocking shelves. We recognized her from Instagram. Shaved stripes in her eyebrow, ring in her septum, flannel tied around her waist. Jamie did the nervous small talk thing while I stood there like a coat rack. When Jamie got to the part about the older couple coming to our apartment, the niece nodded. "That'd be Uncle Carl and Aunt Marie," she said. "They try to head off messes. They won't say it, but they've seen stuff." "We're not trying to make trouble," I said. Weird things keep happening. Calls at night." She stopped stalking and looked at me serious for the first time. "What time?" she asked. 58, I said. She made a face. "Yeah," she said. She pointed at a corkboard next to the coffee machines where people posted lost dog notices and charity car washes. Tucked into the corner was a small index card with a pencil scrawl that looked like a grocery list. It wasn't. It said, "Lock the east gate before 2. Not later." The niece followed my eyes. "Old note," she said. "From before they took down the church. Don't know who wrote it. I leave it there. Nobody messes with the east gate anyway." "What's the east gate?" Jamie asked. "Backside fence," the niece said. "There used to be 2 ways in. People used the front with the chain. The other's a farm track, heads behind the little church foundation." She said it matter of fact, like she was talking about a normal place. Then she caught herself. "Sorry, not trying to creep you out. You're already creeped. Was there a basement?" Mark asked. Was there really a staircase?" The niece shrugged. "I never went," she said. "I've heard there was something under. My grandma said her brother went down there once in the 60s, and when he came back up he had dirt on his hands because he'd been clawing at the steps. She said that like he forgot there were rails, like he had to use his hands. We left with bad coffee we didn't drink because we felt like we had to buy something. We didn't go back to Stull. We told each other we weren't going back, like we were daring each other to break the promise. One more thing, and then the part I still don't like saying out loud. Friday night, Mark didn't come home. Not unusual on its own. He might crash with friends, but he texted me around 9:30 p.m. that he was leaving a friend's house and would see me soon. At 10:15, I texted back, "You good?" No reply. At 11, I called. Straight to voicemail. My stomach did the slow twist. At 11:50, I called Jamie. "He's probably fine," she said, but she was already putting on shoes. "I'll meet you at your place." At 12:10 a.m., the door opened and Mark walked in. He looked normal, a little dazed, like someone who got lost in a thought. "I fell asleep on the couch," he said. He held up his phone. Dead. He plugged it in and the screen came back to life with that little battery red line, then bloomed. He had 3 missed calls from me and 1 from Jamie. He frowned. "Sorry," he said. "I really just fell asleep." He went into the bathroom. I heard the sink. He came out, asked if we wanted grilled cheese like it was a snow day. We said yes, because why not? He pulled out a pan and butter and we moved around each other in that small kitchen dance you learn when you live together. We ate, we even joked. Relief is a drug and we took too much. At 1:58 a.m., all 3 of our phones buzzed at once on the counter. We looked at them like they were snakes. The same no-caller ID, the same voicemail notification. None of us moved. Then Mark reached for his first. He pressed play and held it between us. Wind, that rasping metal on stone sound. Then something else closer than before. A tap, another. 3 more taps like someone was feeling around a lid from the inside. I felt my hands go cold. Jamie gagged quietly and covered her mouth. Then again, footsteps. Not going away, coming up. If you've ever been under a metal stairwell and heard someone walking above you, you know how the sound has a certain ring. That closer, then stopped. A breath, right in the mic. Human. Calm. And a voice that could have been any of ours if you distorted it 3 degrees. If you pulled the vowels in a little too tight. It said close, like it was leaning in. Hook the chain. The message ended. I don't know how long we stood there. We didn't talk for a few minutes because the words didn't fit. Then Mark spoke, voice small. I didn't, he swallowed. Did we hook it? We did, he looked at me. We did, right? Yeah, I said, but I heard my own voice in that voicemail now. Not literally, but enough. Enough to start inventorying details you didn't think mattered until they all did. The chain was looped the way it had been when we got there. The man in the truck said, don't forget to hook it. Not lock it. He said people knew better than to lock people in. We didn't sleep after that. Saturday, we all stayed together. Sunday, too. On Monday afternoon, a post went up in the KU student Facebook group about how the township was asking people not to go to the cemetery on Halloween. There would be extra patrols. Numerous reports of trespassing, it said. Safety concerns. It didn't mention gates or hatches or anything else. It didn't have to. Everyone knew the story already. I'd like to tell you there was a big ending. Police lights. Some dramatic intervention. There wasn't. Life went back to its crooked normal. The calls slowed and stopped by Thanksgiving. Jamie's photo never came back. I saved a few of the voicemails, then deleted them, then emptied the deleted folder because I couldn't stand that they existed. Sometimes I wonder if they're still somewhere under the phone's skin, humming. I haven't heard from Mark in a while. It's not like we had a falling out. He just drifted, moved in with a girlfriend on the other side of town for a while, then took a job in Topeka, then moved farther. We text sometimes on holidays. Hope you're good. You too. He's different on the phone now. People change. Maybe that's all it is. Last spring, I drove through Stull in the daylight because my cousin's kid had a softball game out that way, and I didn't want to take the highway back. The cemetery looked like it always does if you don't make it into a story. Quiet, tended small flags tucked by stones. A guy in overalls was working near the fence, digging a hole for a post. He was singing under his breath. I didn't stop. The road took me past the township building. The notice case had a new paper in it, typed, not handwritten, with the dates of a pancake breakfast. I kept going. That night, my phone lit up at 1:58 a.m. I kid you not, after months. I sat up too fast and my heart did that rabbit thing. The voicemail was 21 seconds long. I touched play like it might bite. If you're waiting for a scream or a voice saying my name, I'm sorry. It wasn't that. It was wind, soft and a distant steady tapping. Metal on stone, a rhythm like someone counting time. After it ended, I sat there in the dark and told myself a dozen normal explanations. Backed up network, spoof joke. My own brain making that sound from memory. Every one of those explanations is probably true. But the next morning when I went out to get in my car, there were 3 small gray flecks on the hood. Not dust, chips. I brushed them into my palm. They were lighter than they looked. And when they touched, they made that dry sound you get from rocks that have been in something else for a long time. I haven't been back to Stull. I won't. People ask about it sometimes, especially if they moved here from somewhere else and heard the stories and want the inside scoop. I do the shrug. It's just a cemetery, I say. People tell tall tales. They nod, maybe disappointed. Then they ask the thing people always ask. But is it true the devil shows up twice a year? Like on Halloween and the spring equinox, right? And the Pope won't fly over it? I tell them the part that won't get me a look like I'm trying to start trouble. Old-timers say a lot of things, I tell them. Sometimes stories keep teenagers from driving drunk, you know. I don't say what feels truer to me now, which is smaller and worse. I don't think the place cares if the devil ever showed up. I don't think it cares about dates or equinoxes or airplanes. I think it cares whether you recognize a boundary when you see one. A chain looped loosely on a gate in a town where people still bring plastic flowers because love sticks around longer than weather. A line of stone in the grass that says this was a building once. You can stand on it if you want. You'll hear something. You'll tell yourself it was trucks on the highway, wind in the fence, your friend's stomach growling. You'll hook the chain when you leave because you're a good kid and somebody taught you manners. You'll hook it and it will sound like a few little taps, nothing. Then you'll go home and hear those taps again at 1:58 a.m. for a while. They'll fade. You'll forget. You'll tell the story if someone asks. You'll laugh in the kitchen light. And every now and then you'll wake up because your phone lit your room with that blue cold and you'll think, fine, I get it, nothing's wrong. You'll roll over. You'll sleep. But sometimes, I'm saying once or twice a year, you'll hear a voice in your dream. Or maybe not a voice, just an idea in a voice that could be yours if you'd spent too long under a stairwell. It will say gently, like a reminder from a friend, hook the chain, and you'll wake up already reaching for your phone, even if you don't have a good reason, and your hand will brush the nightstand and make that tiny click of things shifting on wood, and you'll feel for the ring that isn't there. You'll close your hand around air. You'll tell yourself to go back to sleep. You will. Most people do. If you drive out that way and you see the gate, leave it the way you found it. Don't go looking for hatches. Don't put your ear to the ground. Don't ask the nice old man in the pickup for directions back. He'll give them. He's been giving them for years. People always find their way home. I'm not warning you about devils or popes or anything that would make a good headline. I'm saying the boundary matters. It doesn't care if you believe in it. It cares whether you respect it, that's all. And if you ignore it, if you step over, don't be surprised when ordinary things lean back at you. Phones, gate chains, little stones, the time on a clock. Don't be surprised when you hear someone you love talking like it's not quite their voice. Don't be surprised when a nice couple knocks on your door and asks you not to move things around. Don't put your ear down. Don't listen for what's under. If you do, and you hear footsteps on stone and you don't know whether they're coming up or going down, don't do what we did. Don't stand there debating whether it's your job to help, because here's the last thing I'll say and then I'm done. That Friday night, when Mark fell asleep, he came back with dirt under his nails. Not much. Just the kind that looks like pencil graphite and lives in the half moons of your hands and won't wash out right away. I noticed when he flipped the grilled cheese. I didn't say anything because it was nothing. There's no proof that means anything. It probably doesn't. But a week later, when he helped me move a dresser, I saw a small half-moon bruise on the pad of his ring finger. A faint curve, the shape your skin makes when you pull up on a metal handle that lays flat. I asked him how he got it. He looked at me like he honestly didn't know. No idea, he said, normal, always that word, I haven't been back. If you go, don't tell me. If you get a call around 1:58, don't save it. And if you hear tapping in your sleep, count it like a lullaby, then hook the chain and leave it alone. That's what they do out there. That's what they taught me. And if you don't, if you linger, if curiosity is louder than your caution, then maybe you'll get lucky and see nothing but a small, quiet cemetery in a small, quiet town. Maybe you'll go home and laugh about how people fall for stories. That's what I hope happens for you. But if your camera roll slips a picture into your pocket that you didn't take, and a handle turns a notch different every time you look, I want you to promise me you'll do one thing I didn't do soon enough. Leave whatever's under there to its own business. Hook the chain behind you. And don't put your ear to the stone when the wind finally stops and every part of the night holds its breath, just to see what you'll do next. I'm not from Chicago. I moved there for a job I thought I wanted and a relationship I thought would last, and both of those beliefs ran out around the same time one winter. When I think about that winter, it's weird what comes to mind first. Not the fights, not the empty office after layoffs, but the feeling of my breath hanging in front of me like someone else's, a shape that didn't quite match the way my lungs moved. If you've lived there, you know what I mean. The cold gets under your nails. It settles in the steering wheel. It turns your skin into paper. Back then I was doing late-night shifts driving for rideshare to make ends meet. My route always ended up on the southwest side. The city gives way to old suburbs and truck routes out there, places where the streets have two names because half the locals still refuse to use numbers. I learned to like those nights. The roads were wide, the sky felt bigger, and if you kept your heat at the right setting, you could drive for hours without thinking too hard about anything. Archer Avenue was my favorite, long and straight. The kind of road that makes you feel like you're leaving something behind even if you're just circling around. It's also the road that runs past Resurrection Cemetery. If you live anywhere near there, you've heard of Resurrection Mary. I'd heard about her before I ever saw the gate. A girl in white, a strange chill, a ride that ends at the cemetery, and empty seats where a body should be. People talk about scorch marks on the iron bars. They'll tell you a girl died in the 1930s leaving a dance hall along Archer. Some say it was O. Henry Ballroom back then. later Willowbrook, and never made it home. She still wants a ride. It's a story with comfortable edges. Even when it's scary, there's a path you can follow. You say the names, you hit the landmarks, and you're done. I wasn't interested, not really. Ghost stories feel like other people's things. But the first time I saw the gate, I slowed down anyway. You would too. The ironwork has this dark finish that's already almost black. But when your headlights catch the bars, there's a warped patch that reflects differently. It looks like fingers pressed there for a long time, which is enough to make your skin crawl before you even think about legends. The night I'm going to tell you about was a Thursday in late January. I remember because my phone said 3 degrees south, and the wind pushed that number down into a place the weather apps don't like to name. My roommate Aaron was at his girlfriend's. Jess, my ex, had texted that afternoon, the kind of text that feels like a door quietly shutting. I think it's better if we don't talk for a while. I'd thought about blasting music and doing highway loops until sunrise, but a friend from work, Nate, messaged that a few of them were grabbing cheap beers at a place in Summit, not far from Archer. He said, "Come through." I hadn't hung out in weeks. I told myself I'd stop by for one. The bar was the usual winter mix of regulars and people killing time between shifts. Nate introduced me to a girl named Lily who'd just moved from Cicero to Justice and was asking if the buses ran past midnight out there. I remember that because the TV over the bar was playing some true crime show, where they reenacted a guy missing the last bus and deciding to walk, and Lily laughed like she knew it was a bad idea, but she'd do it anyway if she had to. She had this big white scarf that didn't seem like it was made for actual warmth. Twice she pulled it up over her mouth to talk through it, and the fabric got damp where her breath hit. Nate offered her a ride back if he didn't drink too much. He drank too much by the time I finished my 1 beer, which turned into 2 and a basket of fries. I was sober enough. I told Lily I could take her. She waved me off at first, said Justice wasn't that far, but when I told her I was going that way anyway, she slid off the stool and wrapped the scarf tighter. Nate saluted us from his spot at the dartboard and told me not to let Mary in the car. Lily rolled her eyes. "I've never even been to the cemetery," she said. "I just passed by like everybody." We stepped into the cold and both swore about it. The air stung. The snow along the curb had gone through a few cycles of freeze and exhaust, so it was gray and piled like dirty meringue. Lily's breath came out in quick, nervous puffs. I unlocked the car and she paused halfway in. "You have seat warmers?" "Fancy," she said. "Only for the front," I told her. "But I can crank it." She slid into the passenger seat, careful with her scarf like it might catch on something. The car filled with the smell of her shampoo, something clean and floral that felt out of place in air that sharp. I pulled onto Archer and we made small talk. She was finishing a medical assistant program. She liked old houses. She said she envied people who grew up with grandparents telling them stories from the old country, and the way she said it made me ask what her family talked about. "Bills," she said. We both laughed too hard at that. No one was on the road. When the streets are empty at that time of night, your headlights don't just show you the road, they light up the snow hanging in the air, like you're driving through a swarm of something. I turned the radio down because the news guy kept talking about black ice and spinouts, and when I turned it down, the heater fan became the loudest thing in the world. "Is it true?" Lily asked after a minute. "About the handprints? The scorch marks?" "I mean, they're there. You can see them from the street. Have you touched them?" "No." "You're not curious?" "I'm not curious the way that question wants me to be." She laughed at that too, and then we went quiet. It wasn't awkward. It just felt like the car had settled into a different gear, like how the engine sounds lower when you hit the right speed. The cemetery wasn't far. The gates sit back from the road, but there's a stretch of fence along Archer, where you can catch the bars between the trees. I found myself checking the rear view more than I needed to, like I expected someone to be following us, and every time I did, I caught Lily doing the same thing in her side mirror. At 71st Street, Lily pointed. "I live down that way," she said. "But if you want to go see..." She didn't finish the sentence. I didn't ask. My hand turned the wheel like it belonged to someone else. We drove another minute, and then I slowed in front of the gate. There was a pull-off spot where the snow had been flattened to packed ice from people doing exactly what I was doing. I put the car in park. Lily looked out toward the bars, and her breath fogged the window. The fog spread wider than the breath that made it, like it wanted the whole glass. "I don't want to get out," she said. "I'm not that kind of curious." "Same." We sat there. The wind moved through the trees and made the branches knock together like thin bones. "I heard," Lily said softly, "that if you look too long, it looks back." I wanted to ask what "it" meant. I didn't. We were both watching the same thing anyway. The warped patch on the bars shaped like two hands held there a second too long. The surface caught the light in a way that made it look wet, even frozen. The iron nearby looked normal. Just the two places. The car's heater was singing high. I reached for the knob to lower it, and the second my glove left the wheel, the windshield fogged in a single soft bloom, like someone had blown on the glass from outside. I wiped it with my sleeve without thinking and saw the smear of moisture on the fabric. Lily recoiled. I thought she was reacting to me wiping the glass, but she lifted her hands, palms out, like she was warding off a joke I was about to make. "Your finger, did you see?" she stammered. "Do that again." "What?" "Breathe on it," she said. "Just breathe." It felt stupid, but I exhaled toward the windshield. My breath drew a broad oval of fog, the shape of it what you'd expect. Her shoulders dipped in relief. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Did you think something would happen?" "I thought I saw words," she murmured. "Like when you write with your finger on the glass and it shows up the next time it fogs. My grandma used to do that to freak me out. Secret messages." We both stared at the windshield like it might bloom with a sentence. It didn't. I felt suddenly sharply ridiculous. I put the car in drive. "Want me to take you home?" I asked. "Please." We pulled away, slower now. "There's a bend in Archer right there. A gentle curve that takes you past the cemetery fence and onto a long straight stretch that eventually drops you into more houses." As we cleared the curve, my headlights caught something white at the shoulder. I had to take a second to understand what I was seeing. A woman in a light dress, not much more than knee-length, bare legs, bare hands, standing next to a light pole. The wind lifted the dress like a flag. Her hair was long and blonde or light brown, I couldn't tell, and she wasn't hugging herself the way a person does when they're cold. She was just there, looking a little past the road like she was waiting for the light to change. Lily tensed so hard the seat creaked. "Don't," she said. "No, keep going." "I can't leave her," I said. The words came out before I could choose them. Lily grabbed my sleeve. I felt the tug through the jacket. "Please," she said, "please don't, please." I slowed anyway. My brain was trying to make the picture make sense. A costume party? A TikTok thing? A drunk dare? But the woman's skin didn't look flushed from the cold. It looked flat. That's the only word I have. Like the light wasn't catching it right, and the air around her had this faint glittering to it like a sun halo. Except the only light was my headlights and whatever the town was throwing into the sky on a late night in January. I pulled onto the shoulder. The woman turned her head, not fast, just like she'd noticed us for the first time. Her eyes didn't match the rest of her face. They were not bright exactly, but clear in a way the rest of her wasn't. She lifted her hand in the smallest gesture. It wasn't a wave. It was that thing you do when you want to ask, "Are you going downtown?" without making a big deal about it. Every part of me wanted to unlock the door without thinking. My thumb reached for the button, Lily shouted. It shocked the quiet out of the car. "No!" she screamed, voice snapping raw. "No, no, don't." Her phone lit up in her lap. At the same moment, my dash screen glitched and the radio cut to static, just long enough for a thread of something to come through. A voice? Or just the shape of one, and then it went back to the heater fan and the car ticking quietly with warming plastic. The woman slightly tilted her head like she was listening too, and the second her expression changed, just a flicker. Interest, maybe. I felt a cold in my throat like I swallowed ice water too fast. "I'm sorry," I said to the woman, to Lily, to the road. I don't know who. I pulled back onto Archer and drove. The woman didn't step toward the car. She didn't vanish dramatically. She just got smaller in the mirror until the angle took her out of the view. Neither of us talked until we hit 71st again. "Turn right," Lily said hoarsely. I did. The houses here are one story with low roofs. The kind of place where you can see inside the living room if the curtains are open. It felt obscene to look. The streetlights made the snow into something that glowed from within. Lily directed me to a dark brick building with a narrow driveway. "Thank you," she said, voice small again. "I thank you, I unlocked the doors." She didn't move. She stared at the glove compartment like she could see her face in the plastic. Then she took her scarf off, doubled it and pressed it flat against the inside of the windshield where she thought she saw the words before. She held it there, breathing hard. Just making sure, she whispered. Nothing appeared. She gave a little laugh that wasn't happy. Okay, she got out. When I pulled away, I saw her in the mirror, standing near the stairwell door, watching me, her scarf still in her hand like she'd forgotten to put it on. I should have gone home. I should have called Aaron and told him I was coming back. Instead, I ended up back on Archer, driving the way you do when you want to prove a point to no one. The road was emptier, the sky somehow darker even though I knew it wasn't. I passed the cemetery again, slower this time, and I didn't stop. I told myself I just wanted to see the gate once more, the stupid handprints. It felt like closing a book back to the scene you want to look at one more time to see if you missed something. Near the gate, a snowplow had tossed slush up onto the shoulder, leaving a hard ridge like a frozen wave. There were footprints leading from the road to the bars. Not many. One set in, one set out. The wind had softened them but not erased them. I rolled down my window a crack and the air shoved its way in. A smell like cold iron and something sweeter. Faint, like old flowers. I don't know why I did what I did next. I pulled over, put on my flashers, and got out. The first breath hit me like an insult. My face hurt. The gate stood there, bigger than it looks from the road, the bars taller than me, the crossbars thick as wrists. The scorch marks weren't what I expected. They didn't look burned. They looked polished, like hands had smoothed them. The iron around those ovals had a fine bloom of ice dust you could see if you tilted your head. The ovals themselves were clean. The snow around the gate had a crust on top. My feet broke through with these loud little crunches that sounded wrong and all that quiet. I reached out without touching. My fingers went numb anyway. I could see my reflection, faint in the smoothed iron, my face stretched and wobbling like I was underwater. I pulled off a glove and held my hand next to the mark. It lined up. That's the part that made my stomach flip, the way my hand fit that shape like it wanted to rest there. Someone cleared their throat behind me. I spun, my shoe skidding on the ice crust. A man stood at the edge of the pull-off, his breath a cloud, a hat with ear flaps pulled low. He looked exactly like the kind of person you'd expect to tell you to move along. Older, thin, eyes that had seen too many bored kids trespassing. He had a flashlight in one hand and the other hand tucked under his armpit against the cold. "Town says no stopping," he said, not unkindly. "Road's slick." "Sorry," I said. Everyone just, he said and nodded like he'd heard that sentence before. He gestured toward my car. "Go on." I started back, then turned. "Do you work here?" I asked, nodding at the cemetery. He shrugged. "Sometimes. Is it true?" I asked before I could swallow the words. "The story?" He didn't answer. He walked past me, careful steps in the crust, and stood where I'd been standing, his face close to the iron marks. He didn't touch them. He didn't need to. He tipped the flashlight so its edge hit the smooth spots without blinding me, and the light slid over the shapes like water over stone. "What do you think this looks like?" he asked. "Hands," I said. "Whose hands?" I hesitated. "Hers." He didn't smile. He turned off the flashlight. The dark jumped closer. "Come back during the day if you want to look," he said. "Night air's not good for wandering." When I got home, my phone had 3 notifications. One was from Nate, a photo of a cloud of cigarette smoke with "Mary says hi" scrawled as a caption. One was my bank app reminding me I had a payment due. The third was a text from an unknown number. "Thank you." I assumed it was Lily and started to save the contact, but when I clicked the info, it was blank. No name, no previous thread. I answered, "Are you home?" The message hung for a long time, then delivered. No reply. I slept badly. In the morning, the car smelled faintly like the cold air had moved in and unpacked. When I breathed on the inside of the windshield to demist it, faint shapes bloomed in the fog. For a second, they looked like words, but when I wiped them, nothing was there. And I told myself I was being dramatic. That day at work, we had a safety meeting where they make you watch a video from 1998 about lifting with your knees. The heater in the conference room clicked in a steady beat like a second clock. The HR guy kept clearing his throat. Every time he did, my skin went tight because I could hear the man from last night doing the same thing behind me at the gate. I texted Lily that afternoon just to check. "This is the guy who drove you," I wrote. "You okay?" It stayed on delivered. By late evening, it was still that way. I told myself she just didn't want to talk. I told myself I was thinking about it more than she was. Then the snow started again and I got back in the car. It was quieter out. You learn to tell the difference between new snow and old snow by the way your tires sound. New snow whispers. I drove Archer with the radio off. When I approached the cemetery, the world felt like paper. Even the trees were softer around the edges. I didn't stop. I didn't risk it. But as I passed the gate, something flickered in the periphery. It took a second to realize it was my dashcam light. I'd bought a cheap one months back and barely used it because the night footage was garbage. But it had a motion sensor setting I'd never messed with. It had turned itself on. When I got to a gas station, I took the card out and played the most recent file on my phone. The video was what you'd expect. Grainy, blue-tinted, the road in a cardboard rectangle. The timestamp said 01/12/03. The dashcam picked up the car's interior reflection in the glass like a ghost of me hanging over the road. And then as we slid past the cemetery, the interior reflection went brighter for a second. It looked like a small light moved across the inside of the windshield from right to left, as if something outside had shone straight through the glass. It wasn't a streetlight. The road was too dark for that. It was more like someone held a flashlight right in front of the camera and slid it across slow. The light hit my ghost face and washed it out. For a frame or two, everything was white. I replayed it 5 times, slowing it, pausing on the brightest moment. That was when I noticed the faintest lines in the fog of the reflection, like finger trails on a shower door. Not words, not shapes I could name. Just tracks that curved and crossed like someone had traced lazy circles until they faded. I thought about sending the clip to Nate to get a cheap laugh out of him. I thought about sending it to Lily, but I didn't have a Lily to send it to. The unknown number stayed unknown. I saved the video to my phone and told myself I was done. I took a different route home. I kept taking the different route for a week. Then my tips were thin on a Friday, and the app offered a bonus for rides in the Southwest Corridor after midnight. Money is a boring villain. I took Archer again. The roads were clear this time. Even the big intersections felt calm. Near the cemetery, I passed a cop car tucked into a cutout watching for speeders. The sight made me sit up straight out of habit. I checked my speed, exactly 37 and a 35, and looked back at the mirror reflexively. That was when I saw her again. Same white dress, same bare legs, same not hugging herself stance. She stood one light pole farther down than before. If you asked me to swear if it was the same person, I couldn't. If you asked me to say it was different, I couldn't do that either. Every detail I remembered seemed right. Every detail I checked was fuzzy. I didn't stop. I knew what would happen if I did. I knew I couldn't trust the part of me that had reached to unlock the door last time. Like a muscle memory I didn't remember learning. I kept going, hands tight on the wheel, eyes forward. The cop car sat quiet behind me like a story waiting for its turn. At 79th Street, my phone buzzed. New ride, pickup, Willow Springs. Destination Summit. That's basically back along Archer. Good money. I took it. The pickup was a guy in a tan Carhartt jacket and a woman with a braid so tight it made my scalp hurt to look at. They smelled like diesel and long days. They got in without small talk. I took them to a little house near the tracks. On the way back alone, I hit the light where you can cut toward justice or keep going, and for a second I didn't know which to pick. The air in the car tasted sweet, like the first breath you take when you walk into a flower shop. My eyes watered. I thought the heat was too high. I dialed it down. My hands itched under my gloves like I'd touched something I shouldn't. I don't remember deciding to stop at the gate. I only remember standing in front of it again, this time with both gloves off. My palms an angry red in the cold. The smooth spots looked back like small, calm lakes. The wind was still. I could hear my blood in my ears. I held my hands close to the iron, then closer, and then just for a second, I let my skin touch. It didn't burn. It was colder than anything I've touched in my life. So cold my brain couldn't make a sensation out of it. It felt like silence feels at that hour. And in that fraction of a second, 3 separate things happened. Or I decided they did. And I know how crazy that sounds, but they all felt true at once. First, I smelled cigarette smoke. Faint. A brand I hadn't thought of since high school. The kind my friend's aunt used to smoke on her porch after dinner. Second, a pressure on my shoulder, not hard but insistent. The way someone touches you when they need you to leave a party before you do something you can't take back. Third, a voice, behind me and inside me. Not a word. More like the shape of no. I pulled my hand back and it stuck for a fraction of a second the way a wet tongue does on a popsicle in a dare. There was no sound. My palm was pale where it had kissed the iron, a perfect oval that darkened as the blood came back. I heard the crunch of steps on the crusted snow. I spun and saw the same man with the ear flap hat or his brother from the same mold. "Night air's not good for wondering," he said again. "You get enough of it, you start answering yourself." "I think I heard," I began. He shook his head. "Doesn't matter what you think you heard." "I wasn't going to," I said. He smiled finally, but it wasn't friendly. "Everyone says that too." I went back to my car. My hands throbbed. When I dragged my palm over the steering wheel, I left a faint smear like sweat that wasn't sweat. When I breathed too hard, the windshield fogged, and for a split second, letters formed in it and then vanished. I don't know what they said. I'm not going to guess. Guessing is how you build a story you can't get out of. I stopped driving Archer after that. Meeting someone for coffee? Sorry, can't, road's bad. Heading south? GPS sent me another way. I could still feel the iron kiss in the pad of my hand for days. I kept waking up with the smell of flowers in my throat. Nate made fun of me for a week and then got bored. The unknown number never texted again. 2 things happened months later that pushed me to write this down. The first, I was at a thrift store in Lyons looking for a cheap lamp when I found a stack of old flyers for dance halls and ballrooms. The paper was the kind that smells like attics. One was for a New Year's Eve dance at O. Henry Ballroom, the place that became Willowbrook. The flyer had a sketch of a couple dancing, the girl in a knee-length dress with a flare that looked like the wind held it up. Someone had written a name in pencil in the top corner. I don't know why I checked. I don't know why my stomach dropped when I saw it. It didn't say Mary, it said Lily. I told myself 1,000 times that a lot of girls are named Lily. I told myself the flyer ended up there because everything ends up somewhere. I didn't buy it. I left it in the stack where I found it. I went back the next weekend and it was gone. Maybe someone else bought it. Maybe the store threw them out. The second, I got an email from the rideshare company. "We've flagged some unusual behavior on your account near Resurrection Cemetery. If this was you, no action is needed." I opened my trip history to see what they meant because I hadn't driven Archer in months. There was a ride listed for a Saturday. I'd been home on my couch watching a stupid cooking show. Pickup near 79th and Archer. Drop-off, Resurrection Cemetery gate. The log showed driver canceled 30 seconds after pickup. The timestamp was 2:22 a.m. I don't believe in patterns the way I used to. I think we see faces in clouds because our brains hate static. I think some stories last because they're good at staying together. I also think about Lily sometimes and the way her scarf soaked with breath when she held it to the windshield. And how the fabric looked just a shade too dark for a second, like it was holding on to something it shouldn't. I still have the dash cam clip. It looks dumber every time I watch it. Grainy light. Hints of lines that might be nothing. I keep meaning to delete it. I keep not doing that. I don't drive Archer anymore. If I have to go that way, I'll add 20 minutes to the trip and wrap around on 95th or take the tollway. I tell myself it's because of construction. That might even be true. But sometimes when the wind goes the right way and the temperature drops hard, I'll be outside taking the trash out and I'll see my breath hang wrong. Just a little too slow and my hands will itch. And I'll think about iron that feels like silence. They reopened Willowbrook as an event space for a while after a fire, and then it closed and opened again under different names. Places do that. They keep the bones and change the skin. People do too. If you're reading this thinking you want to go because you think you're the kind of person who can keep lines between stories and sidewalks, I can't stop you. But if you get there and you decide to breathe on the glass, or put your hand on the gate just to feel your heart kick against something that doesn't care, and you think you hear a voice in the part of the cold where there shouldn't be any sound, try not to decide what it said. Don't give it words. Don't be helpful. And if you see a girl in a dress on the shoulder, and she doesn't look like she's cold the way a person is cold, and your thumb moves toward the unlock without you telling it to, and the radio hum rises like a mouth opening, just keep your hands where they are. The road is straight for a reason. Some stories only want you to turn because it's the only way they can come with you. Last thing, a few weeks ago I drove past Archer on the expressway. Through the concrete and winter bare trees, I could see the shape of the cemetery like a darker shadow. I wasn't anywhere near the gate. I wasn't thinking about it. At least I don't think I was. My palm started to throb the way it does when you've been holding a hot cup too long. I looked down and saw a faint oval there, pale, like the memory of a bruise or a sun print you didn't notice forming. When I got home, I pressed my hand against the bathroom mirror and breathed. And for a second, a circle formed around my palm in the fog, like something on the other side was lining itself up. It faded. Of course it faded. I wiped the glass, turned off the light, and went to make dinner. But later that night, my phone woke me up with a brightness it shouldn't have had. I blinked at it through sleep and saw a notification from unknown with a message previewed on the lock screen. "Are you going downtown?" I swiped it open, already knowing there wouldn't be anything there, and I was right. No message, no number, just the app icon for the rideshare ghosting like it had for a second thought I was on shift. I put the phone face down and listened to the heater tick, and the ice on the window make soft settling sounds, and the house breathing like an old person in a chair. The room smelled like nothing. It smelled like the cold. I closed my eyes and tried not to imagine the road and the gate, and the light sliding across the inside of the windshield like a question waiting for someone to help finish it. There's a way to tell this story that ends with me seeing her face in the rear view, or finding finger marks on the inside of the glass. I don't have that version. I only have the quiet, and the way the winter air holds shapes a little longer than it should. Maybe that's enough. Maybe if you stand there on Archer and stare at the bars long enough, you'll see exactly what you want to see. Or maybe you'll see your own hand in the metal, stretched and wavering, fitting itself into a place you didn't realize was made for you. Mary, Lily, whatever name helps it stay put. Those are just handles for the same door. If you try it and it swings easy, be polite. Back away, the night doesn't owe you answers. The night, if anything, accepts returns. I'm not from Salem, but I moved there for work 3 falls ago because rent on the North Shore was still barely manageable if you had roommates, and you didn't mind living above a bar. I ended up on Howard Street, a short walk from the cemetery people always photograph through the iron fence. If you've ever been there, you know it's not a flashy graveyard. It's low and flat and tired, with slate stones and the kind of grass you only get in old New England plots. Patchy, stubborn, a little sunken in spots like something heavy pressed down on it and the ground never quite forgave it. I'm an EMT, nights and weekends mostly because I was new. My roommates Eli and Maria worked odd hours too. Eli did security for the museum's satellite exhibits in October, and Maria bartended. We were all on different schedules and mostly met in the kitchen around sunrise, passing each other like ghosts, trading notes on who finished the milk and which tourist tried to steal a brick. I didn't choose the place because of the cemetery. It just happened to be cheap and close to the station. But you can't live on Howard Street without learning about Giles Corey. People talk about him the way you talk about weather you can't avoid. It's gonna rain. Watch for black ice. Giles walks before something bad. They say his shadow shows up before calamities in Salem. Fire, flood, things that break when they shouldn't. Sometimes folks tell that story for tips, sometimes for drama, sometimes because they believe it. I didn't. I'm not a believer, not in ghosts anyway. But I listen. In my job, listening is part of not dying. The first time I felt something off, it was the week before Halloween, just after midnight. I'd walked from the station back to my building with Eli because he'd just finished a patrol. The streets smelled like wet leaves and fried dough. The wind kept pushing old police tape around a broken lamppost, making this dry paper whip sound. We slowed down a little by the cemetery because a tour group was still milling there, listening to a guide who had one of those portable speakers hanging off his chest. You could hear him from half a block away, matter-of-fact, talking about the pressing, how Corey refused to enter a plea, how they put boards on him and stones on the boards. More weight, and how he died without giving them the confession they wanted. Guy's voice is too casual for that story, Eli muttered. He kept one hand in his jacket even when he wasn't cold. Security habit. You ever get used to that, he asked? People turning a death into a souvenir? Someone's got to pay the rent, I said. Even the dead. He smiled at that very briefly and then his face changed. Not like he'd seen something exactly, but like his attention got pulled. I followed his line of sight. Between the fence bars, the stones lay like teeth. Beyond them, the faint shape of the big elm leaned into the dark. Thought I saw a guy in there, he said, standing near the middle. Big shoulders. Might have been the trunk, the guide's speaker squealed. The tour members flinched and laughed. The guide apologized and slapped the device, and the sound came back. Static, then his voice again. Eli shook it off and we kept walking. It was nothing. I went to sleep. At 2:35 a.m. the tones hit. Structure fire on Lafayette. The dispatchers sounded different for real fires. Less drawl, more focus. We rolled out with another crew and I caught a glimpse of the cemetery on the turn. Headlights scraped over the fence, and for a second the grass looked like the surface of a pond in wind, rippling in place. The fire wasn't large, but the smoke was ugly and old, like burning rope and varnish. Everyone got out. We treated 2 people for smoke inhalation and 1 firefighter who twisted his ankle on a rotted stair. I didn't think about Howard Street. It was a city. Buildings burn sometimes. It happens. The next morning I woke to find a gray pebble on the kitchen counter. Maria said she found it on our windowsill and thought it looked cool. It was smooth on one side, rough on the other, with a thin white line like a scar. She kept it because she collects small objects. Tokens, she calls them. "Don't put that in your mouth," she warned me as I poked it. "It probably has dead witch on it." "They weren't witches," I said. "I know," she said. "It's a joke." After that, small things started lining up in ways I didn't like. Our radio checks on the ambulance came back with ghost echoes. Dispatch would say, "Unit 43, read you clear." And the speaker would carry a half-second, lower-pitched repeat of the same words, like someone else said them under their breath. Eli's flashlight, the heavy mag light he trusted like a second brain, flickered whenever he walked the block by the cemetery. He changed the batteries twice. It still happened. Maria's bar kept getting calls from a number that showed up as no audio. Just that slow, breathy static you used to get when a dial-up modem was trying to decide if it loved you. We kept chalking it up to October tourist nonsense and weird season glitches. The city swells that month. Too many phones, too many bodies, too many pop-up businesses. Something's gonna hum wrong. But then I had a call that stuck a piece of ice in me and left it there. This was on a Monday. Wednesdays in October are busy. Saturdays are insane. Mondays sit in the middle like a person deciding whether to join in. We were posted near downtown when we got sent to a well-being check, which is code for the neighbor called because something feels off and they don't want to be the one to knock. The address was a few blocks over. We parked by the curb and climbed past the plastic skeleton on the stoop. The hallway smelled like plaster and old mop water. The apartment door was cracked open. I announced and pushed. An older man sat on the couch, hands folded, TV on mute. He was breathing and he turned his head when we entered, so that alone made me exhale. The neighbor who called came hovering in the doorway, explaining that he hadn't seen Mr. McGuire. That was the name we later learned in a few days. We ran through the assessment. Vitals were fine, a little high blood pressure, nothing alarming. The place was neat in a way that made it look recently apologetic, if that makes sense. Like someone had tidied it for the first time in months. The only weird thing was a flat river rock on the coffee table and the way Mr. McGuire kept glancing at it. "Do you want to go in?" I asked, "and get checked out at the hospital?" He shook his head. No. I'm fine, I saw him." "Who?" I said. Penn paused. "The man who stands in the cemetery," he said, matter of fact, and a little embarrassed. He looked at me through the fence. I was coming back from Stop and Shop. He stood there and he looked at me. Then he turned and walked across the grass. He didn't sink. I'm trained to nod at any experience like it's real from where they're standing. "When did you see him?" "Yesterday," he said. "And the night before." "Yesterday he had a bag. It looked heavy. He held it like this." He mimed a grip at his side. "I thought he might be some Halloween actor, but he didn't have a face of a showman." "Do you know what I mean?" I did, even if I couldn't explain how. "Did he try to talk to you?" He said, "Not ready." Mr. McGuire looked at the muted TV, the closed captions tripping over a weather alert. "Not ready," and then he was gone. We left him in good shape, with a card and a call if anything changes. We were halfway down the stairs when I heard a soft thump from above, like a bag of sand being set down. My partner and I looked at each other and kept walking. You don't go back for sounds like that if you just decided the person is safe. You let them have their privacy and your paperwork stays clean. That evening, the museum where Eli worked did a small emergency drill with the fire department. He texted me. Weird vibe by the cemetery, radios cutting in out. Sparrows all over that tree like someone glued them. Then he sent a blurry photo from across the street. It showed the cemetery fence, the stones, a smear of something darker near the elm. "I know it's nothing," he wrote, "but it looks like a guy carrying a sack." I told him to stop sending me Halloween pictures and help me find my wallet when I get home because I'd lost it again. And he told me not to blame the dead. 2 days later, we got storm warnings. A nor'easter was sticking its finger in the map and swirling. The city started moving the crowd barriers and National Grid trucks lined up like yellow beetles. I slept a little after sunrise and got up to gray-green light. The wind kept changing its mind. The sky had that low lid quality, like it could come down if someone kicked the table leg. Maria texted from the bar. "Boss wants us to open if power holds gonna be a zoo. Bring candles from under the sink if you're nearby." Eli left for his shift early because he wanted to do one more check of the exhibit's basement pumps. I decided to walk to Howard Street first. Not because I had a reason, but because when you live there, the cemetery becomes a kind of barometer. If you ever see the geese leave a pond all at once, that feeling. That's what the cemetery gave me that day. An absence of animals. No crows, no squirrels, nothing. The grass was moving in little waves where the wind grabbed it. The elm's branches made a sound like an old swing. A city worker stood near the corner with a clipboard, hair stuck to her cheek with rain. She was talking to a cop I recognized, Sergeant Doyle, who always sounded like he was trying not to laugh. "They didn't shore the trench right," she said. "They did this cut to replace the water line, but the fill's been settling. It's making a sink near the south wall. Inside or outside?" Doyle asked. "Outside for now," she said. "But if the wall footing gets compromised..." "Great," he said, and then he noticed me. "You on or off today?" "On in 3, I said. "You want me to walk around with you?" "Stay dry while you can," he said. "City owns enough liability." That night the storm came. Power flickered, paused, reconsidered, came back in segments. We rolled for a guy who fell down his basement steps checking his shop vac. We rolled for a car that tried to drive through a flooded intersection and learned that water is stronger than you. We rolled for a woman who called because her ceiling made a sound like a whale taking a breath and she didn't know whether to sit under it or run outside. The radios hissed and cracked and occasionally repeated us like a mockingbird's that same one-beat late echo. Around 1 a.m., the museum called in a water alarm. Eli texted, "Basement's taking it, pumps can't keep up." Then a minute later, "Weird smell like whetstone?" IDK, then nothing. My calls to him stuck in voicemail think space. I told myself he was in a dead spot. He's always in dead spots. It's an old building and we're all in dead spots. At 1:20, the tones hit again. Possible gas leak, Howard Street and Church. Caller reports outdoor smell. Gas leaks in storms are like ghosts in old houses. Every gust makes people think they're hearing or smelling something. We went anyway. We arrived to find 3 people standing under umbrellas looking guilty for being there. One was the city worker from earlier, without the clipboard now, hair plastered darker. One was a man I'd seen a dozen times hauling construction gear, third shift version of a day job. The third was Mr. McGuire in yellow slicker, holding the smooth river stone like a talisman. "I didn't call about gas," he said before I opened my mouth. "I called because he's in there. He's pacing. He keeps putting his hand on the dirt like he's checking if it's firm enough." I looked where he pointed. The south wall of the cemetery had a low bulge like a belly. The ground in front of it had sunk into a shallow trough that was now filled like a tan soup. The rain made rings on it. Lights from a cruiser washed over the fence. For a second, honestly just a second, it did look like someone was moving between the stones, not walking, shifting, like the air had a weight to it in one place and less in another. Doyle waved us back. "Gas shut off on this block's upstream. National Grid is en route. Keep people away from the wall." The city worker pointed at a spot where the grass had turned darker. "It's undermined there. If that goes, it'll take a section with it." She looked afraid in a very different way than the tourists were. Not ghost afraid. Actual consequences. We started shuffling people away. The construction guy swore softly into his jacket. The wind pulled at umbrellas until they inverted. The rain stung. Somewhere a transformer popped and sizzled green. For a long minute nothing happened, and then something did. It wasn't dramatic. The wall didn't explode. It exhaled. The ground in front of it gave a long sighing slump, like bread collapsing, and the water, which had been pooling, decided it had somewhere to go. It spun into the new dip and pulled with it what had been grass and soil and the top layer of something brick. The wall listed 1 inch 2, held then cracked, a diagonal line like a vein breaking through a skin of paint. The crack made a sound like a pencil snapping. We all moved back, even those of us who were supposed to move forward. Training holds until it doesn't. Doyle grabbed my arm hard enough to leave finger bruises and pulled me behind a sawhorse. The construction guy swore louder. The city worker called something into her radio, and the radio answered her in that half-second echo I'd been hearing all week, like it was overwriting itself with a heavier voice. An opening yawned at the base of the wall. It wasn't large, but water loves edges. The trough became a funnel. Mud spun, then cleared, revealing a cold, slick plain of old brick set in a curve like a tunnel mouth that got interrupted and never forgiven. The smell hit then. Wet stone, yes, but also the metal damp of coins. Something like an old cellar that never dried. I breathed through my mouth and yelled at the construction guy to get back, but he was already moving forward. Because you can't convince certain types of people not to fix things. He sent his flashlight beam into the hole. The light showed brickwork, old, even older than old. The kind of old that made you realize time doesn't start or stop where you live. The beam also showed something that scattered the light. Small, smooth, pale ovals, maybe shells, maybe rounded stones, maybe. A leftover board from the trench job skated loose and tipped toward the hole. It wedged across the opening like a badly placed diving board. The water climbed it and went under, like it had been trained. The board flexed. The construction guy grabbed it barehanded. "If this goes, it's taking half my site," he said through his teeth. "Let it go," the city worker said. "You can fix the site tomorrow." "I can't fix you." Behind us, someone shouted. I turned. Mr. McGuire was halfway along the fence, eyes fixed on the center of the cemetery, that elm rising like a question. He wasn't scared. He looked resolved in a small, private way. "He keeps saying not ready," he told me when I got close. Rain ran into his eyes and he didn't blink. "But I think he means the ground." "Not me. I don't recommend this, but I squeezed between two fence bars. I'm not a big person and adrenaline makes you smaller." My boot sank an inch into the cemetery grass. Water pooled around the edges of the graves like dark tea. The elm's bark looked wet-banded, and the branches shivered in wind that didn't feel strong enough to cause that. I walked carefully, placing each foot on the parts that felt higher. You can tell in old cemeteries where the earth dips. My flashlight made a pale cone on the stones. Names slid in and out. I didn't speak. It felt like I'd be interrupting. In the exact middle, or what felt like the middle, the ground had a different give. It was packed harder, like someone had stood there for a long time. The rain fell harder as I reached it. The sound of water moving through the breach at the wall became more insistent, a throat clearing. I saw a man then. He was not a full figure, and he was not transparent. It was like my eyes agreed there was a shape that air had to move around. Broad shoulders, heavy set. He stood with his weight shifted like he was carrying something. He didn't look at me, and I don't know if he could. He kept his face toward the south wall, toward the hole. "I can't help you," I said, because that's what I tell people when I can't. I don't lie, but I can tell them to move. He didn't speak, but something eased in the set of that not figure. Or maybe I said that because I needed to believe this wasn't just a storm and a bad retaining job, and the way a city finally answers for what it rests on. I turned and made my way back out the way I'd come. The city worker and the construction guy and Doyle watched me push through the bars with a look that said, "Write your own complaint." "The ground's compacted weird in there," I said, breathless. "If that wall goes, the center's going to sink toward it. You need to get people back on this side too, all the way back." "That's what I've been saying," the city worker said, but she said it with relief now that someone else said it too. Doyle started moving the line backward and people obeyed because the sound of the crack was still in their ears and the rain had started to feel personal. National Grid arrived. They shut something upstream and argued with someone on a phone. Fire showed up and put their lights in a slow roll that made the water in the hole look like breathing. The construction guy finally let go of the board and it slid into the gap with graceful resignation. The funnel widened. The brick curve inside revealed more of itself, a smooth old throat where water was welcome. In the noise of it, my radio spat my name. It didn't sound like our dispatcher. It sounded like my father when we fought, flat, heavy, disappointed. "Unit 43, you copy." Then our actual dispatcher's voice over it startled. "Who?" "43, confirm location," I answered. And this time the radio carried my voice one beat twice like a kid making fun of me. I checked my partner's face and saw my own expression on it. No one had time to untangle it. We didn't belong to the radios right then. We belonged to the wall and the rain and what would happen next. What happened next was quiet and slow. The wall didn't fall, it leaned. The hole expanded gently. The water made a deeper path under the bricks and then a lower sound. The topsoil inside the cemetery went from taut to slack to slumping, not in one piece but in long size. The way someone sits down on a bed they've been standing next to for too long. The elm lifted one of its roots like a hand and then put it down again very carefully. The center of the cemetery, the spot I'd stood on, sank an inch, then two. I watched the shape of the man turn his head, not toward me but toward the movement, and step forward. The ground didn't take him. He moved like you'd move over ice, well, he stopped above where the earth gave a little more, and then he turned his face to the wall again and waited. "More weight," Maria had said once without humor, while we watched a tour pass by our window. Imagine that being the last thing you ever say. The ground gave again. The funnel pulled. The city worker grabbed my sleeve, not to pull me but to anchor herself. She said, "If the tunnel runs under church, we'll have to reroute water and it will take months." She said it with the calm voice of someone counting spoons after a burglary. I stared at the gap. The brickwork had a mark on it, a groove worn by water and something else long before tonight. The groove looked like fingers had been there, or the ends of boards or the edge of a sack dragged over and over. The water found it like it knew it by heart. It started to rain harder and then it didn't. The drops softened. The air had that lighter quality storms sometimes get before they decide if they're done. The funnel smoothed out. The hole stopped widening. The wall held its tilted line and stayed. People let out breaths they'd been holding so long they had no air left in them to give. It wasn't over. The city worker called someone important and said words like interim shoring and historic district and "we need a big favor." Fire put tape in a taller line. The construction guy coughed and apologized to no one for almost doing something stupid. Doyle's radio stopped echoing. My radio breathed against my chest like a live thing falling asleep. We stood there until we were just people in rain, not actors in an old story. I walked home with my boots making small gripping sounds on wet pavement. Maria was asleep. The power had gone out and come back. Eli's room was empty. His bed made like someone tried on the idea of rest and changed his mind. He came home around 4 a.m., soaked and silent, and stood in the kitchen in the blue-gray light. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. He opened his mouth and closed it again, then said, "I kept getting a smell like the river, but inside. The pumps failed, then they didn't. I can't explain it. It felt like the building leaned and decided not to. The security camera in the basement looked like someone walked past it carrying nothing, like the idea of something heavy." He set something on the counter, a smooth gray river stone, almost identical to the one Maria had found. This one had two white lines crossing each other. A faint grit of sand clung to it, even though he'd just been in a basement. He wiped his hands on a dish towel like he was trying to wipe off a thought. "You didn't take that," I said, "right?" He frowned. "It was in my jacket pocket. Did you put it there?" He shook his head. "I don't put rocks in my jacket. I don't collect tokens. We didn't sleep, not really. We sat there and listened to the storm decide its last course. Around dawn, the light came up pale and thin. I checked the news. 2 minor fires controlled. A tree through a roof with no injuries. Water in basements. The wall on Howard Street listed but standing. City advises caution around the cemetery. Repairs underway. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could make into a headline that wasn't just storm hits people cope. I worked a double that weekend. Tourists kept coming, because October doesn't care about storms. The guide's voice by the cemetery sounded more careful, like he'd thought about what he was saying for the first time in a while. "Some say Giles Corey appears before disaster," he said. "Other people think it isn't a threat. They think he didn't say more weight because he wanted death. They think he said it because he was buying time." On Sunday night, Mr. McGuire came into Maria's bar wearing the yellow slicker even though it wasn't raining. He sat in the corner and ordered tea. He waved me over when he saw me. "I didn't sleep," he said. "I kept hearing someone set down a bag. Over and over. Not dropping. Setting down. Where?" I asked. "In my living room," he said, like it was the most normal place. He touched his pocket and I knew what he felt without seeing it. He used to say not ready, and he said, "Last night I heard enough. It wasn't a warning. It was an assessment." An assessment of what? He looked at his cup. Of whether the ground would hold. Weeks passed. The city put temporary supports by the wall. A crew worked careful days like dentists. The hole revealed more of itself as a collapsed stretch of old drainage running under the edge of the cemetery, a piece of channel from a time when the jail sat where the parking lot is now, when the water needed a place to go. Some historian wrote a small column about it. People commented and corrected in the way people always do, warring over dates like they're defending property. A different historian wrote another column to say, "It's complicated," which is the true shape of most stories. October ended and the city sighed into November, less costumed but still itself. Tourists left the way a tide leaves in long out-breaths. We got a little sleep. We hung up wet jackets that finally dried. We talked less about ghosts because we didn't want to be the type of Salem people who talk about ghosts all year. But I started keeping the stone Eli found on my bedroom windowsill, because not believing doesn't require being rude. The last thing that happened that might matter was quiet. It was late. I was reading an article about historic brickwork failures because apparently that's who I became. The radiator made the soft ping noises radiators make like a metal cricket. Wind made the building talk. Then, very distinctly, I heard from the kitchen the sound of something heavy being set down. Not dropped. Set down with care, like a person who measures with their body. I walked out expecting to see one of my roommates come home, but the kitchen was empty. The window was cracked to let out cooking smell from hours before. The street below was indifferent. On the table there was a thin trail of grit like dust from a stone. It led to the smooth gray pebble Maria had found, which was now sitting an inch to the left of where it had been all week, as if someone who did not know or care about our arrangements had put it exactly where they wanted it. I picked it up. It felt warmer than the room. I didn't put it back. A few days after that, the city announced the wall would be fully examined in the spring. Everyone involved said the same sensible things, that it had been a close call, that old infrastructure likes to reveal itself at inconvenient times, that we should all learn from it. People went back to telling the Giles Corey story either as a threat or a warning depending on what they needed from it. This is the part where you might want me to decide what I think. I still don't believe in ghosts. I have to make decisions about which pains are real in seconds in the rain, when the radio makes your name sound like a stranger's voice. I don't have space for belief. I have room for facts. Wall listed, hole opened, water flowed, no one died. We were lucky. Or we got the message. When I walk past the cemetery now in the evening, sometimes I stop at the fence and look for nothing. The grass is flattened into new curves. The elm holds its big arms quiet. I think about a man who refused to say the words they wanted because he wasn't going to let them use him to take more land and more money. I think about how more weight can be a dare or a strategy. You lean into it when you know the beam will shift. You buy an inch. You make the ground decide. Maybe the shadow people see before calamity isn't a curse. Maybe it's someone in a place between holding and letting go, checking the dirt, setting down what he can carry in a way that doesn't break the boards. When storms run through this city, the old parts try to move. Something has to stand on the middle and say enough and mean the ground, not the people. Or maybe we're all telling ourselves that because it's easier to live above a bar on Howard Street in a city built on guilt, if you believe someone is watching the footing, even if he's not there for you at all. I still keep the stone on my windowsill. In certain weather, it smells like a river. In certain light, the white line in it looks like a crack mended the wrong way. On quiet nights when the wind makes the glass sigh, I hear the careful sound of something heavy being set down in the next room. Not to stay, not to crush, but to measure. And every time I hear it, I think about the center of the cemetery and the way the ground held when it should have given, and how in this city the scariest part isn't the idea of a ghost. It's the way weight moves through things, and how you only know what will break when you ask it to take one more ounce. I walk past the fence. I don't go in anymore, not because I'm afraid of what I might see, but because I'm afraid of misunderstanding it. And I think disrespect is the bigger sin in a place like this. The tours pass me and the speakers say their careful words, and the tourists hold their breath for a photo that proves they were near an old hurt. The grass ripples the same way it did that first night, and the elm leans into wind it learned long before me. And somewhere in the stones, a man with wide shoulders, who might not be there at all, puts his hand on the earth like he's checking if it's firm enough, and waits. I grew up in Montgomery County, Ohio, and if you're from around here, you've heard about Wolfinger Cemetery even if you don't think you have. It sits on a stretch of gross nickel road where the houses thin out and the cornfields give up their last stalks to a line of pine and crooked stones. People say the cemetery is older than the asphalt. They also say it's where a young bride was struck by lightning on her wedding day back in the 1800s. Her veil caught fire. She fell before anyone could reach her. Since then, drivers swear they see her walk out of the tree line with her dress smoking and her hands out like she's reaching for a lift she never gets. I never believed the story. I'm not trying to be that guy, but I worked night shifts stocking at the Meijer off Shiloh Springs for 2 years, driving past old farmhouses and those little family cemeteries that look like someone forgot to put them away after the Civil War. I thought Wolfinger was just one more of those local legends people recycled to scare freshmen and tourists. I could have kept on thinking that if it wasn't for last fall, when my car started shutting itself off near the gates, when a veil I didn't own showed up in my back seat, and when I realized you can get an answer to the question you're not brave enough to ask just by rolling down your window at the wrong time. I want to put this somewhere that won't get lost behind some paywall, and I don't want clout. I just want this thing out of me. Maybe you'll read it and think I'm lying. Maybe you'll think I'm dramatizing. Fair. If you're local, you can check the weather reports for the night I'm writing about. Thursday, October 12th. Clear skies. I remember because we all checked and the forecast was boring. No lightning, no storms, not even a drizzle. It started with a text from Tasha around 5 in the evening. She works as a night nurse at Good Sam and keeps weird hours. She'd just gotten off a shift and wanted food before crashing. "Greasy or greasy?" she wrote. I suggested George's in Trotwood.
She said yes.
We looped in my cousin Leo, who was already buzzing because the Bengals had an away game that Sunday, and he was convinced he'd found a lock on some ridiculous parlay. We ate, we talked, and somewhere in there Tasha brought up Wolfinger. She said 2 people she worked with refused to take Wolf Creek Pike home after dark now. Both had seen smoke across the road by the cemetery, like someone had lit a pile of leaves and walked away. When they slowed down to see, a tall figure stepped out into the headlights with its head tilted, like it had to think about where to look. "I'm telling you, it's everywhere this week," Tasha said, picking at a fry. 2 Facebook groups I'm in, 3 separate posts. Dashcam clips of empty road and then whoosh like fog, except it rises and smells like a socket. Leo laughed, but it was a soft laugh. He has a laugh that sounds like he wants you to laugh with him, so he's not laughing alone. "So you guys want to go?" he said. "Do the drive-by? I don't spook easy, but this would be my first ghost bride." "I need to be home by 10:30, Tasha said. "I have to be back in at 6. I didn't have a reason to say no. I didn't have a reason to say yes either, except I'd been feeling stuck for months. New job I hated, a relationship that had fizzled out. The kind of stretched-out anxiety that makes you keep every light on in the house and then check them again. I thought a drive sounded harmless, something we'd tease each other about later. I'll own that. I made the call. Fine, 20 minutes. We just drive past and head back. We took my car. It's a 2011 Civic with a dent in the front fender from the time a deer changed its mind at an intersection. The 3 of us squeezed in, the way you do in a car you trust because it's gotten you home more times than it hasn't. We cut across Salem Avenue, past the shuttered strip malls and the one pawn shop that never closes, and turned down Gross Nickel. From the first turn it felt colder. I know, that's what people always say. But the temperature on my dashboard went from 59 to 55 in 3 minutes, and I thought maybe the road was lower, or the air pooled there, like it does in the hollows beyond Englewood. The cornfields were head-high walls, black as if someone had drained them of color. We didn't talk. Tasha fiddled with my radio, but all the stations were fuzz and distant country. She shut it off. "Right here," Leo said, leaning forward between the front seats. He's the one who'd pulled it up on his phone. A picture of the cemetery sign, Wolfinger in a white oval. Iron posts on either side, stones leaning at random angles like someone had blown on them. The sign is right after that bend. We came around the bend and the sign was there in the headlights, except the oval wasn't white anymore. It looked scorched, a soot smear at the top that darkened the letters. Tasha sniffed. "You smell that?" She rolled down her window before I could answer. It hit me then. The scent of something burnt, not heavy like a campfire, cleaner and sharper, like a popped fuse. Ozone. That's the word. Probably someone's burning brush, I said. Even though it was October, and the ground was damp and nobody burns at night around here anymore unless they want a visit from the volunteer fire department. We rolled past the gates. I didn't slow down. I don't know why that suddenly seemed important. Do not slow down. Leo had his phone up like he wanted to film, and I said, "Don't, you'll drop it and it'll vanish down the seat." And then, because it felt like the kind of joke you say to cut the fat off the moment. Besides, ghosts don't show up on iPhone. No one laughed. That's when I noticed it, the roadside fog. It didn't pool. It formed in thin fingers that rose from the ditch and crossed the road in long threads, like a spill slowly being mopped by an invisible hand. The threads met each other and wove, drifted apart and pulled back together. The smell sharpened. Tasha rolled her window up and hugged her arms. "I just got cold all at once," she said. I kept my eyes on the double yellow. If you've ever driven that stretch, you know the road dips a little after the cemetery, and then there's a tree line that makes a wall of dark. As we descended, my headlights strobed the pines. In one gap, just for a half second, I thought I saw someone standing among the stones. A shape the right height, but not quite the right posture. Too tilted, like the ground had moved under them. We made it past. The weight in my chest loosened. Leo said, "Well, that was smoky?" He sounded disappointed and relieved at the same time. And that's when the car died, no sputter, no warning lights. The dash went black as if someone had unplugged the whole panel. The engine didn't cough. It just wasn't there anymore. I tapped the gas out of reflex. Nothing. The lights died with the engine and the world slammed to unlit. I coasted. It was all I could do. The road is flat just after the dip and the Civic slowed quick. I wrestled the wheel toward the shoulder. Gravel popped. Then we stopped. The dark pressed against the window so thick I could see my own reflection like a stranger staring back. Tasha said, "Nope." Her voice went thin. "Electrical," I said, and I was proud of how steady I sounded. "Battery cable or a fuse. I've had it happen before." That was true, but not like this, not everything at once, like someone had snipped the one artery that fed the car. I went to turn the key and there was nothing. No click, no attempt, dead. Leo offered to get out and look. I told him to wait. I don't know why. I just felt it. The way you feel the wrongness of standing on a frozen lake when the ice groans under you. I cracked my window instead, thinking I'd catch a whiff of what we'd smelled and find an explanation. All I got was cold, and then we heard it. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't voices. It was the sound of wet fabric being dragged along asphalt. A soft scrape with a pattern to it. Not steady, closer, stop, closer, stop. Leo whispered, "You hear that, right?" None of us moved. If we moved, we'd make a noise, and the noise would tell whatever was outside exactly where to look. It was a ridiculous thought, because our car was the biggest object on the road, but it felt true. The scrape paused by Tasha's window. She put her palm against the glass like she was holding it shut. Her breath fogged it. Through her fog, we could see the faintest light like heat shimmering off a grill, but inverted. Cold shimmering. I'm not describing it right. It looked like the air next to her window had been heated from within, but the night was so cold the heat turned to glass and pressed flat. Something tapped the door. It was gentle. If a child tapped your knee under a table to get your attention, it would sound like that. My voice came out of somewhere below my ribs. "We are leaving." I tried the key again. It did nothing. Leo reached across me and flicked the hazards. Dead. There's a part of your brain that keeps a list of the worst things you could do in a given situation. Mine jogged up to the front with a suggestion, honk the horn. But when I pressed the center of the steering wheel, it didn't even click. The car was a brick. The scrape moved past the driver's door. Whatever was outside didn't hurry. It sounded like it had all the time in the world. We watched our own reflections in the glass because we were too scared to look past them. Then the scrape stopped again, right at the seam where the hood meets the windshield. Something brushed the wipers. Just a whisper. Another tap, this time on the glass itself up near the rearview mirror. The tapping had rhythm. I don't remember the rhythm exactly, and that bothers me more than it should. If I could count it out, make it math, maybe it would feel less like it was language I almost understood. What if it needs help? Leo asked. He said it because the legend had gotten into our heads. We all had the same picture, a burned dress, a veil, a face you can't see. What if it's just some historical loop thing? You're supposed to ignore it. Or you're supposed to stop, Tasha said so quietly I almost didn't hear her. She's the kind of person who can resuscitate someone in a Walmart aisle because she happened to be there. She has that muscle in her brain that says move forward, not away. The scraping receded, not far, just a few steps. I felt the weight in the car change, like the air inside had been held tight and let out by inches. I told myself we were hearing a raccoon drag something, or the wind pulling a plastic bag across the road. The smell sharpened. The ozone became a taste. My tongue went numb at the edges. In the silence that followed, something else spoke. Not a voice. It was my phone vibrating in the center console. It lit up my face and looked obscene in the dark. Unknown number? No area code, just 5 digits. It buzzed once, then stopped. Leo's phone buzzed. Tasha's did too. I'm not answering that, Leo said. We didn't. The screen blacked out. In that second, as the light was dying, I saw something in the rear view. Or I thought I did. A pale length like cloth draped across the back seat. Not mine. Not Tasha's jacket. Not Leo's hoodie. Something thinner, older. I turned fast. The back seat was empty. The Civic is small, and the back seat fills your whole view when you turn. There was nothing there. Next car that comes by, flag them, I said. I kept my voice level. Tasha said, what if there isn't one? And that, stupidly, was the first thing that almost broke me, because she was right. That road is quiet after 10. I don't know what made me try the key again. Habit. Hoping the universe had changed its mind. When I turned it, the engine caught so suddenly the car jolted. Every light in the dash came up at once. The radio blared static for a split second and then cut to whatever preset Tasha had left it on. It was a bad pop song. I've heard it since and had to leave the room. Go, Leo said, not a shout but all breath. Just go, I went. The wheels spun in the gravel before they bit. As we pulled forward, something white slid up the windshield. It wasn't a face. It wasn't a cloth. It looked like steamed breath condensed on the glass in the shape of a long oval, and then smeared upward by a hand you couldn't see, a hand that left no prints. The smear went up and over the roof. I checked the mirror and saw the road behind like a throat. The cemetery gates a dark mouth and a small brightness in the ditch like a patch of firefly light. It wasn't a firefly. It stayed in one place and pulsed once, twice. Then it went dark. We didn't speak until we reached the first lit intersection. I turned left toward town. My hands had been stuck in a death grip on the wheel so long my knuckles ached. At the first red light, I reached for my water bottle and almost laughed at the way the cap shook in my hand. Leo finally said, well, like he was about to make a joke. He didn't. I think we should go somewhere with other people, Tasha said. I don't want to go straight home. We landed at the speedway. It was bright and warm and smelled like coffee that had been on the burner too long. We stood by the slushy machines, not buying anything. Strangers moving around us. Normal life happening like we hadn't just been handed a piece of something that didn't fit inside it. Let's just do the basic sanity checks, I said, because if I had tasks I could breathe. Car hood, smell, any marks, phones, we went back out. Under the bright lights, the hood looked normal. No scorch marks, just the same dust pattern. But when I put my palm flat on the metal, the center was cold, colder than the air, like the hood had a pocket of winter in it. My palm came away dry. Tasha checked the passenger door. It's clean, she said. No prints in the dust, no streaks. The windshield had a smear we could only see when we breathed on it, and the fog from our lungs collected in uneven patches. It looked like someone had wiped it in 2 long swipes. Phones, Leo said like it was a nasty word. We compared call logs. Each of us had the same missed call. No number, just 5 dashes, no voicemail. When I tried to tap it, the log app froze and then crashed. I opened it again. The call was gone. Okay, I said. We go home. We did. I dropped Leo first, then Tasha. Nobody wanted a hug. We were all too brittle. When I got home, I went straight to the shower. The water warmed me, but it took a while for me to stop shivering. There's a specific shiver you get when fear has been in you for longer than a minute. It's not dramatic. It's small and mean and doesn't care that you're safe now. I went to bed. I left the bathroom light on. I'm not proud of that. It's what I did. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up with the sense that someone had said my name. In that drifting place between sleep and wakefulness, we agree to weird things quickly. I sat up. My room was the lukewarm orange color of a nightlight. A sound came from the hallway. A soft drag. I thought it was the HVAC. I told myself so out loud. I lay back down and pulled the covers up. The drag came again, closer. My mouth filled with the taste of a penny. The smell wasn't in the room, but the taste was. I stared at the ceiling and listened to nothing else. The drag stopped. Then something tapped gently at the foot of my bed. You would think I yelled. I didn't. I froze the way a hand freezes when it reaches for a burner and feels the heat above it. I slid my feet under the covers until my toes hit the mattress bar. The tapping was patient. 3 taps, a pause, 2, 3, 2. It wasn't the rhythm from the car. It was different. Through the cotton of the sheet, I felt the faintest bit of cool air move, like someone walking past you in a store aisle. I whispered no. Not to it, but to the part of me that was about to look. I looked anyway. There was nothing at the foot of the bed. The blanket lay smooth. The room was the room, but in the corner near my closet door, a thin strip of white hung in the air like someone had cut a piece out of fog with scissors and moved it inside. It hovered for a moment and then fell. When it hit the floor, it didn't make a sound. I didn't move until the first light came through the blinds. When I finally stood up, the strip was still there. It was fabric. I thought I'd recognize it now, but I didn't. It wasn't old the way movie costumes look old. It was new somehow, clean and stiff, but not any fabric I owned. Thin like a veil. The edges were singed just enough to curl. But when I touched them, my fingers didn't come away with soot. My fingertips tingled the way they do when they fall asleep. I did the stupid things first. I checked my doors, locked. Windows latched. No footprints in the dust by the back door. I checked my closets, empty. Then I picked up the strip. It was longer than my arm from wrist to elbow and lighter than it looked. I held it up to the light and thought I could see something written in the threads, not ink, not dye, but the way some words are woven into the weave. If I tilted it one way, faint letters. If I tilted it another, nothing. I couldn't read it. I called Tasha at 7. She answered on the first ring. She said she hadn't slept. She'd heard dragging too, and her cat, old, indifferent animal, had stared at a corner for 30 minutes and wouldn't cross the doorway. I have to go in at 9, she said. I'm thinking I'm going to take Wolf Creek anyway, just to see. I know that's stupid. Don't, I said, more force than I meant. Please don't. I won't, she said, and I heard in her voice that she wanted to, not because she was reckless, but because nurses like neat edges. If there's a thing you want to name it, chart it, stick it under a heading that lets you put it away. This wasn't that kind of thing. I called Leo next. He said he'd slept fine. He laughed, and this time it didn't have the softness. He said he'd chalked it up to weird fog and old battery. I told him about the veil strip. He said, man, that's just from somebody's curtain. And I wanted to reach through the phone and shake him, because there's a difference. And if he came to my house and touched it, he'd feel it curl against his fingers like static, and his nails would ache like they'd been chewed. I didn't go to work. I drove back to the speedway and then to the cemetery in daylight. I parked across from the gates and sat for a long time with the engine off. It was warmer with the sun up, but when I rolled down the window, the air on that side of the road felt like it had been stored in a basement. The sign's blackened top looked too clean to be soot. It looked like heat had kissed it once and left a mark it couldn't wipe off. There were other cars that day. People do walk here. Teenagers taking pictures for something. A couple walking a dog, an older man in a flannel jacket who stood by one of the older stones and took off his hat. Nobody looked at me. I didn't get out. I didn't want to step onto the grass and find out that my foot wouldn't lift. I considered throwing the veil piece out the window. I pictured it catching the breeze, rising in the sun like someone's dollar caught by updraft, and then sinking to the ground by a grave that didn't have my name on it. I didn't. I put it in my glove compartment, shut it, and drove away. Over the next week, it got stranger in small ways that are hard to make sound like anything but coincidences. My kitchen light flickered only when I walked under it. The smoke detector chirped at exactly 11:21 p.m. for 3 nights and then stopped. A smells like static gunpowder scent would lift out of nowhere when I opened my front door, as if someone had been standing on the porch a second before and stepped back. My phone would vibrate once with no notification, and then show 12:07 on the lock screen, even if it was the middle of the afternoon. We didn't go back together, but I had to drive past the cemetery twice to get to Leo's, to pick up Tasha at a dentist appointment when her ride fell through. Each time I told myself I'd take a different route, and each time the GPS rerouted me back because of traffic. The second time, early evening, I passed a small memorial at the ditch. Fresh flowers, a plastic bride and groom cake topper, a handwritten note inside a sandwich bag, a picture of a woman in black and white wearing a dress without a veil. People leave these things for reasons I can't decide are sweet or cruel. Make a ghost an altar and you might just be feeding it. 2 Sundays after the first night, Leo sent us a video. He'd gone back on his own. He didn't say that, but I knew from the angle in the commentary. He'd propped his phone on the dashboard and filmed the drive past at 9:30 p.m. A normal night. Clear. He didn't slow down. He kept up a cheerful commentary to himself, the way you sigh whistle in a dark basement to prove you're not scared. He passed the gates. Nothing happened. He laughed, still alone, see? He said in the video. Just a cemetery on a country road. And then the radio cut to static. For 3 seconds. A clean interruption and then back to music. He laughed again and the laugh had the softness back. Okay, he said, he didn't post it anywhere. He didn't tell us he'd done it in a group chat, just sent us the file. I watched it twice and felt the same thing both times. Not relief, not fear. A kind of dread that sits behind your ribs and knows it has time. Tasha stopped answering for a few days. When she did text, it was all clipped, work stuff, call schedules, flu shots. I saw her the next week on a break and she looked like she'd slept standing up. Let's not talk about it here, she said. I don't want it to like being said out loud. I kept the veil piece in the glove compartment until late November. That's when we got one of those freak warm spells and the air smelled like rain for 2 days. I had to get my inspection done, and I didn't want the mechanic opening the glove compartment and finding it. People find things for you sometimes and make decisions you can't take back. I took it out and brought it inside, wrapped it in a grocery bag, slid it between 2 books on a shelf I don't use much. I thought not looking at it would be the same as not having it. I don't know how to end this. That's the truth that doesn't make for a good story. It didn't end. It went quiet. Sometimes quiet is worse. Last week I woke at 12:07 exactly, not because anything had buzzed, but because the time was in my mouth like a word. I got up without turning on the light. I walked out to my car in my socks, held my keys between 2 fingers like I was trying to choose which one hurt more. The sky was low and the street was empty. My breath hung for a second and then slid away. I opened the back door. The veil piece was lying across the seat. Not the glove compartment, the seat. It had unfolded itself, if that's what you want to call it. Looked a little longer, or maybe I just had the nerve to see it right. In the dome light, the woven letters showed more clearly for a second from a certain angle. I held my phone over it and tried to catch it in a photo. The camera clicked. In the photo, the fabric is there, but the letters aren't. The pattern looks smooth. The edges still have their not-soot singe. I reached out, put my hand on the cloth. It was cool, not cold. I closed my eyes and said, I'm sorry. I don't know who I meant it for. When I opened my eyes, the dome light flickered once and came back. A car passed at the far end of the street, headlights sliding over like a tide. It moved slow, too slow for the speed limit. As it went by, I caught the outline of the driver through their side window. They weren't looking at the road. They were looking at me. I went back inside with the veil in my hand. I didn't lock the car. That felt like asking for something's permission to visit. I put the veil on my kitchen table and sat with it while the fridge buzzed like tired cicadas. After a minute, my phone, face down, vibrated once. I flipped it over. The screen was black. No notification. 12:07. Now I'm here, throwing these words into the void that eats everything eventually. And I keep thinking about the legend of the bride and lightning and the veil catching fire. It's a good story, simple the way stories need to be to survive on mouth to mouth. But there are things you don't notice until you've been the person on the road in the dark. Like how the smell isn't smoke. Like how the tapping is always patient. Like how what you bring home might not be the same shape as what you took, but it fits you exactly where the fear lives. I don't plan on going back. That sounds braver than it is. It's not a decision. It's me admitting the decision was made for me already. The veil sits on my table as I type. The letters are sometimes there, sometimes not. When I hold it up to the window, the morning light makes the weave look deeper, like there are layers the fabric can hide when it feels watched. I've tried to trace it on paper. The pencil won't touch the same lines twice. If you drive Gross Nickel at night, don't slow down by the gates. I know that contradicts every safe driving thing you've heard since you were a kid. I'm serious. Keep your speed. Don't roll your window down. Don't answer calls that aren't numbers. If you have to stop, stop somewhere people are. Go stand where the floor is sticky with spilled pop and the coffee is burning and some tired kid is scraping the hot dog rollers. If you hear dragging on the tile, leave. And if you bring something home without meaning to, don't feed it an explanation. Don't lay it out somewhere nice and talk to it like a guest. You can say I'm sorry once, then let it be. I used to think ghost stories were about the dead being stuck, but the stuck ones are us. We're the ones who keep turning around when a soft tap asks for our attention. We're the ones who answer calls that don't have names. The dead, or whatever she is, has her loop. She walks, she reaches out, she leaves a piece and takes something else. Some nights she gets to keep more than we do. I almost deleted this. Then something tapped my wall, 3 slow, 2 quick, and I decided to hit post instead. I'm going to put the veil back in the glove compartment and drive to the speedway. I'll get coffee I won't drink. I'll stand under bright lights. If I pass the cemetery on the way and see smoke on the road, I'm not going to look at it. But I also know that if a figure steps out of the tree line with her head tilted like she's choosing where to look, a part of me will lift a hand without thinking. It's what we do. We reach back, even when we tell ourselves we won't. If you see me parked by the side of Gross Nickel with my hazard lights off and the radio playing static, keep going. Do not knock on my window. Do not try to open the door. No one is home. I'll get where I'm going eventually, even if it's just the same stretch of road rolled out beneath me again and again like a veil pulled smooth by cold fingers, catching on nothing, waiting for a spark that doesn't need a storm to find it. I'm not from New Orleans. I moved there last year for a contract job and told myself I'd be gone by summer. I fell in love with the food first, then with how the air is always carrying some kind of song. Church bells, brass, cicadas, somebody's old radio. But what really hooked me weirdly were the cemeteries. Those raised tombs outnumbering the living houses in certain blocks. The way sidewalks just gave up like the ground itself didn't want to be exact. I used to walk by St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 on my lunch break and peek through the fencing. It never felt empty even when it was closed. It felt like a crowd pretending to be still. This happened in late May, right before hurricane season, when the heat started laying on your shoulders like a wet towel. My roommate Maya worked the front desk at a small boutique hotel on Rampart, the kind of place that put bowls of sugar packets at the bar and called it continental breakfast. She liked to collect stories from the older guests who came back year after year. She'd sit behind the counter, elbows on an old ledger, and ask, "What brings you back this time?" People didn't need much encouragement. They'd talk about music, family recipes, and yes, ghosts. That's how my name got passed along to a cemetery caretaker named Mr. Baptiste. "He says you've got a good face," Maya told me one night, twirling spaghetti with a plastic fork, like someone who listens. "He wants someone who'll sit and record him, not interrupt with dumb questions. He says the young guides never listen, they only collect. I do audio on the side. It's mostly podcast scraps for friends, cleaning up tracks, editing dead air." The thought of sitting with an old caretaker in the shade of mausoleums while cicadas screamed in the trees sounded perfect. And maybe it would kick me into doing something with all the voice memos I've been hoarding since I arrived. We arranged to meet during visiting hours so it wouldn't be weird. The cemetery is off Basin Street, a few blocks from my apartment if you cut through the park. When I walked in that first day, the stone heat felt like a wall. The tombs stand shoulder to shoulder, cracked and bulging in places where families added names over the years. There's a map, but it's basically a suggestion. Mr. Baptiste was by the gatehouse wearing a tan shirt with his name stitched on it, like a mechanic. He had a bright red pocket square that didn't match anything. "You the recorder man?" he asked. His voice was raspy in a friendly way. I told him I was just there to listen. He smiled and led me past a tour group huddled around a bronze plaque with a guide who sounded like he was calling a baseball game. We wound through the aisles. He pointed with 2 fingers when he talked, like he didn't want to gesture too rudely at any one name. He showed me Marie Laveau's tomb, the real one and the fake one. People had left little gifts, marbles, beads, cheap cigars, a bundle of hair tied with red thread. On the plastered side of the tomb there were chalk marks, the famous triple X's. Some looked old and gray. Some were fresh and thick, like the hand pressed hard with the chalk to make sure the mark stuck. They don't do it right, he said. Everybody wants but nobody bargains. She was a businesswoman. Business still stand. He walked me to a bench under a stubby magnolia and told me to sit. I pulled out my little recorder and asked if I could press it on the bench between us. He nodded. Start with your name, I said. He looked out toward the tombs like he was reading off a script written on the walls. Baptiste L. Aubin. I've been working here since '82. Back then you could climb where you wanted, leave what you wanted. Folks stole too, don't let nobody lie. Took angels off the corners, do you believe the stories? I asked, trying not to sound corny. I believe in cause and effect, he said. That good enough? We recorded for an hour. He told me about floods and repaintings and why some tombs bulged in summer heat. He told me about a lady who got locked in once after closing because she thought the rules didn't apply to her. He didn't get suspenseful or whisper. He just talked. It was great tape. He wouldn't let me walk out the way we came in. He led me on a longer route, stopping to touch certain corners with his palm. For luck, he said, but he didn't smile when he said it. As we were nearing the gate, he paused by a smaller family tomb. Its plaster bubbled like bread dough and adjusted a glass of water someone had left at the base of it. You know about the X's, he said. Don't go marking what you can't pay. I'm not the type, I said, and meant it. He gave me his number written on a receipt and told me to bring fresh batteries next time because the dead eat batteries like pralines. The second time I came, Maya asked to tag along. She likes to be around people telling stories, and I didn't want to be rude by bringing someone to a quiet place, but she promised to keep her voice down. We met on a Wednesday when the sky was white hot and a brass band's rehearsal carried from a block over. We spotted a tour guide named Chris, the cousin of a bartender Maya knows, steering his group like a kindergarten teacher shepherding kids on a field trip. He threw us a nod. Stay hydrated, he mouthed. He had that tour guide humor where everything feels like something he said 3,000 times. Mr. Baptiste didn't seem thrilled to see Maya, but he set up 3 folding chairs in the shade like he had already decided to forgive it. He didn't want to sit by the bench that day. Better air over here, he said, which wasn't true. The smell of hot stone and flowers was thick. Maybe he didn't want to be near the Laveau tomb because it had attracted a knot of people with chalk and markers and selfie sticks. A girl in a sundress was bending to draw a really careful set of X's. You could tell by the way she leaned in that she was making a wish. The recording that day was less about maintenance and more about manners, as he called them. You come to ask, you leave something that cost you, he said. Not money, time, work, a promise you can keep. You don't knock on folks' doors and then run away. He said people often scrawl the X's and tap the tomb 3 times because they saw it on YouTube, and then they go straight to Bourbon Street and forget it. He said forgetting was the dangerous part. We were packing up when he asked, without looking at us, if we had ever been in there at night. We shook our heads. Good, he said. Respect the schedule. But people sneak in, right? Maya asked. They try, he said. Some find what they want. Some find more. The third time, Chris, the tour guide, invited us to a night tour for staff and friends. It wasn't exactly legal, but Chris said he had checked with a friend who checked with someone else, and it's fine. Maya was excited like it was a secret show. She kept saying, "We'll see the real thing, not just the brochure version." I texted Mr. Baptiste to ask if it was okay. He responded with one word, "No." I should have left it at that. But curiosity plus the need to keep good audio rolling pushed me into rationalizing. Maybe he just meant not okay for tourists, or maybe he was old-fashioned about rules. I told myself we'd be careful. The night we went, the air tasted like pennies. It had rained at dusk and everything steamed. Chris met us by the side gate with a flashlight he kept flicking on and off to save the batteries. He was more nervous than he wanted to show. There were 8 of us, me, Maya, Chris, another guide, 2 off-duty hotel workers, a line cook, and a quiet woman in scrubs who said nothing except "I left a coin once" when we introduced ourselves. Inside, it didn't feel like the daytime place. The city noise flattened. Even the mosquitoes were less bold. Our shoes scuffed in that aisle gravel that's really more powder than rock. Chris kept his voice low but fell into his rhythm, pointing out inscriptions, a famous painter, a jazz musician, the site where a movie once faked a rising from the grave. He finally asked if we wanted to see the Laveau tomb without strangers around. We drifted that way in a clump, our flashlight beams doing most of the talking. We turned a corner and almost walked into Mr. Baptiste. He was standing still in that giant stillness. No flashlight, no extra blinking safety vest. For a second, I thought it was a statue. Then he said, in a voice so normal that it made me feel like we were the ones doing something weird, "I told you no." Chris started to explain about the friend of a friend permission, and Mr. Baptiste just shook his head. "This is not a place for your after hours," he said. He tilted his chin at me. "You recorder man, you know better." I started apologizing, mouth running before my brain, and he held up a hand. "Since you're here," he said, "keep together. Don't leave nothing unbalanced. Don't take nothing off the ground." "What do you mean unbalanced?" Maya asked, but he had already stepped into the aisle, moving past us like we were part of the scenery. We followed. The Laveau tomb was just ahead. With nobody there, it felt less like a souvenir stand and more like a person trying to sleep while someone rattled pots in the kitchen. The offerings looked neat, not staged exactly, but arranged. The glass of water was full and still. There were X's in chalk and in pencil and in what looked like red lipstick, some smudged into angles that made my eyes blur. The woman in scrubs stood completely still, then reached into her pocket. She took out a quarter and balanced it on the narrow ledge of the plaster, like she had done it 100 times. Then she whispered "thank you" in a voice that sounded like she was actively fighting tears. It made me want to look away, and it made me want to record everything. "All right," Chris said, softly clapping, like he was telling a story about respect. "We'll make a circle and..." The coin slid. I know, coins slide. Air moves. Angles shift. But it slid toward the center of the ledge as if the surface tilted the wrong direction, then stopped and stood upright on its edge. It stayed that way for 3 long breaths. Then it fell flat. It made that tiny ring sound coins make when they flop from an edge and settle. The woman in scrubs put her hand to her mouth and nodded. She looked relieved. Her shoulders dropped. Mr. Baptiste sighed, not annoyed, not dramatic, more like someone who just remembered the stove was still on at home. "Circle," he said. "Close it. I didn't know what he meant." He pointed to the ledge. "You put something, you owe something. Balance." People started pulling out whatever they had. Bobby pins, a ticket stub, one guy's shoelace. Maya put down a little silver saint charm she wore on a chain. It looked wrong to leave it, but her hand didn't hesitate. "Not your religion," Mr. Baptiste murmured to her almost kindly, "but it'll do." I stood there with empty pockets because for once in my life I'd left my backpack at home. I felt stupidly exposed. I finally dug up an extra set of AA batteries from my jeans and placed them, side by side like little coffins, on the base of the tomb. "Don't leave metal on the ground," said a voice behind me. A voice so near that I flinched and almost knocked one battery into the dirt. When I turned, nobody was that close. Chris had backed us up so his flashlight lit all of our faces like campfire ghost stories. "All right," he said again, and this time his voice was pitched higher, like a kid trying to sound like an adult. "Let's move along. Thank the nice spirits. Respect, respect." We left the aisle. I swear we left it together. But as we rounded another corner, the way back looked different. I know cemeteries can do that. A left where you meant a right. A familiar angel that looks like a stranger from this angle, but all the pathways felt slightly narrower, like they had grown shoulders in. The air cooled a little. It was the kind of cool that doesn't freshen you. It sinks. Mr. Baptiste stopped at a corner and put his palm on the plaster of a tomb that had no name left. Just flaked paint and a shadow where a plaque used to be. He looked at us the way a school crossing guard looks at cars that aren't slowing down. "You opened," he said. "Now you close." "What did we open?" Maya asked. She was trying to sound calm, like she was asking about the weather. "Your mouth," he said. "Your needs. Your debts," he nodded toward the aisles. "They like to help. They like to be remembered. But this is business." Somewhere behind us, a little tap, tap, tap. It sounded like a stick against stone. Then a whisper. It wasn't English. It wasn't a language I recognized, but it was language. I'm not going to pretend I heard full words because sometimes a cat's breath can sound like a human syllable when you're hyped up. But it curled. Syllables soft and then hard, like someone reciting something under their breath. I felt pressure at the back of my neck, like hands hovering but never quite touching. I told myself we were scaring ourselves. Chris told us to keep moving. He tried to make a joke, "We'll bill the ghost for the overtime, Xiao," but his voice skidded. He lifted the flashlight and the beam trembled. We got to a crossway where 4 aisles met. Left was blocked by a ladder leaning against a tomb for repairs. Right was a narrow path full of puddles from the afternoon storm. Straight ahead was the way out. It looked normal. I could see the silhouette of the gatehouse and beyond it, the city lights and a bus sliding by on Basin. I could hear people on the sidewalk, laughing the way people laugh when they're not thinking about their bodies at all. "Go," Mr. Baptiste said. The woman in scrubs went first. She made it 3 steps and then her shoe stuck. Not caught in mud. Stuck like gum, except it wasn't sticky. She pulled, and when it came loose it made a sound like a suction cup lifting off glass. She grimaced. "Okay," she said, speaking to her own foot. "Okay, we're not doing this." She took another step and stopped again, both feet now resisting. She started to bend down to yank them, and Mr. Baptiste snapped, "Don't kneel." Her back straightened. She looked at him like a kid caught trying to sneak a piece of cake. He nodded toward the path. "Walk shoulders low. Don't announce yourself." We started moving in a line. The air on that path felt a degree colder, like a current from a cracked door. The whispering got a fraction louder and then stopped, like someone cut a radio. My recorder, which was clipped to my belt loop, flashed. It always shows a little red LED when it's recording, and I hadn't pressed record since we met up outside. Now it was flashing like crazy, the tiny screen backlighting numbers like they were being typed in fast. I grabbed it and it burned my palm. Not hot like fire, but like it had been sitting on a charger in the sun. I fumbled it and it fell. Before it hit, Maya caught it. "Don't drop," Mr. Baptiste said. Even though we hadn't, we reached the gatehouse. The inner gate was closed. I don't mean locked. I mean closed, with the chain looped and the padlock sitting there, fat and patient and unmistakably fastened. Chris swore. He'd left it open. He swore again and reached for the keys clipped to his belt. He went through them twice and then a third time. Thumb and forefinger working, taking too long, making that frantic key jangle sound that makes your blood pressure spike. "Why'd you lock it?" he asked Mr. Baptiste. Not a question, a baby's accusation. "I didn't," Mr. Baptiste said. "You took too long." "Too long for what?" Maya asked. "Business hours," he said. He turned to me, and in the flashlight I could see his eyes weren't amused, but they also weren't afraid. "Do you have something to say?" I had a dumb thought. "Sorry. That's what you say when you get caught somewhere after closing. Sorry." I opened my mouth, and what came out was, "We didn't mean to take without paying." It felt stupid and childish and churchy. But as soon as I said it, the air around my shoulders moved like a breeze in a box. My hair didn't lift. Nothing cinematic, but the pressure eased, or my brain let it ease. Maybe that's the same thing. The woman in scrubs said, "Thank you for before," in a small voice, like she was apologizing after bumping someone in a grocery aisle. Chris stopped with the keys and stared at us like we were both acting, and he hadn't been given the script. "Can we please not?" he started, and then the key slid into the padlock like the lock moved to meet it. He swore again, this time in that intimate way people swear when something touches their private fear. He turned the key. It resisted for a second and then opened. The chain came off with an angry hiss, like it wanted to make sure we knew it was doing us a favor. We didn't run. It wasn't that dramatic. We walked fast, like we'd parked in the wrong neighborhood. Outside the gate, the city noise swelled and the air warmed. A streetcar dinged 3 blocks away. Someone shouted. Someone laughed. We stood there being normal for a full minute, like actors after the director calls cut. "Phones," Mr. Baptiste said. "Everybody light your phone screens." We did. He took us one by one and made us hold the lit screens toward our faces and then toward our chest pockets and then toward our shoes. "You're clean," he'd say, and motion to the next person. It looked ridiculous. It also felt necessary, in the way you feel about seatbelts after a short, scary stop in traffic. When it was my turn, he paused at my belt loop. "Recorder," I held it up. The screen was blank. The battery indicator, which had been full when we walked in, was empty and flashing. "They eat batteries like pralines," he said again, like a dad repeating a joke he knows is true. We split up fast after that. Chris mumbled something about never again that sounded like a promise to himself and a lie to his boss. The woman in scrubs nodded at the cemetery like it had done her a favor and got into a lift. Maya and I walked the 3 blocks home without touching, which is unusual for us. We usually link arms and point out stray cats. At home, Maya took a long shower without music. That's how I know she was spooked. I sat at the table and stared at the recorder. When I finally plugged it in, it made a tiny sound the way electronics sigh when they're being revived. The screen lit. The readout said .000, which made sense except when I scrolled through. It jumped to a file labeled with that night's date and a timestamp that matched the time we were stuck at the gate. I hadn't pressed record. I would have had to lean down and press a physical button, and the little light would have blinked. But there it was. I pressed play. The sound was a mess. You could hear footsteps, gravel, the moving husk of fabric. Every now and then, a whole room would be silent and then a voice would rise too close to the mic. It wasn't any of us. It wasn't Mr. Baptiste. It was that same not English language falling in a rhythm that felt like a priest reading the front end of a prayer, waiting for the congregation's amen. In the middle of it, there was a tap, 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 and then, clear as my own name, a word that sounded like balance, except not through my mouth. Through someone else's teeth, I stopped the tape. I told myself I was tired and spooking myself, and that I'd listen again in the morning when the sun made the kitchen ordinary. I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., when the city exhaled and the drunks had been absorbed into beds and couches, I heard 3 light taps from my front door. Not a knock, a tap with something small. I froze the way you freeze when a bug lands on you and you can't see it. I waited. 3 more taps. Then nothing. I watched the darkness like it had a pattern to decode. I must have slept for an hour. When my alarm went off at 6, I was drowning in that heavy sweat you don't get rid of with showers. Maya had already made coffee. She looked better. She was scrolling on her phone, casual. "We're never doing that again," she said. "But also you have to admit that coin thing." "Yeah," I said. "Hey, did you hear somebody at the door?" She looked at me over the phone. "No," she set her cup down. "I dreamed someone braided my hair." She laughed and then realized she didn't think it was funny. "My hair was braided when I woke up," she added like she needed to offer proof. I walked to the front door. I didn't expect anything. I opened it and looked down. On the mat was a chalk mark. 3 X's, quick and thin, like someone had dragged the chalk lightly, not wanting to press too hard. Below it were 2 AA batteries side by side. They looked like my brand. I've never had a brand for batteries before New Orleans, but I do now. The ends had a little smear on them, gray-white like someone had touched them with dusty fingers. I woke up in a body that knew not to pick them up. I used a paper towel and moved them to the table. I told Maya. She stared at them and said, "Who?" "Someone with a key?" I offered. We both knew that didn't make sense. I texted Mr. Baptiste. I didn't know how to begin, so I sent a picture of the batteries. He answered after 20 minutes. "You took and gave." They took and gave. Don't leave that open. I asked what that meant. He sent, "Balance isn't balanced until it is." That was all. We returned to the cemetery that afternoon like idiots who never learn. We went during regular hours. The lady at the gate took our entrance fee and told us the rules like she was telling a fairy tale she didn't quite believe. No touching, no chalk, no unsupervised wandering. She pointed to a sign that had an actual icon of a stick figure drawing an X with a line through it. "No markings," she said. "If you want to ask, ask in your head." Mr. Baptiste was by the magnolia with a broom. He didn't look surprised to see us, but he didn't look happy either. We told him about the taps, the chalk, the batteries on the mat. He nodded once. "Don't come at night," he said. "Don't go making circles you can't close." "That's all? Did we attract something?" Maya asked. She was fiddling with her bracelet like someone trying to look casual while fastening a life vest. "Everything here is attracted," he said. "Y'all like magnets too. That's why you moved here. Some folks get called." He raised an eyebrow at me. "Recorder man, you got a good face. That mean you got a good door. Learn how to close it," I asked how. "Say thank you, pay your debt, keep your bargains," he said. "Don't announce you want what you want to every name you don't know. And stop letting your friend take you to night school." He nodded vaguely in Chris's direction, even though Chris wasn't there. "Is there something we should do about the X's on our mat?" I asked. He shrugged in a slow old man way. "Sweep your own porch," he said. "And don't sweep at night." That night I did not sweep. I waited until morning and swept the chalk toward the street, even though every bone in me wanted to sweep it toward the door so it felt contained. I put the 2 batteries in a Ziploc bag and stuck them in the freezer because my grandmother used to freeze batteries. and I didn't know what else to do with something that had touched what it touched. I listened to the recording again. I tried to clean it up on my software. I ran denoise, I ran EQ. I pulled out a band where the whispering sat. Boosted certain frequencies you'd use if you were trying to hear someone in the next room. The language didn't become English. It did become clearer. There were moments where the voice paused and another thinner voice answered, like a call and response. I sent a clip to a friend who taught linguistics, asked if they could place it. They wrote back, "I can guess at French Creole, but it's very degraded audio." It didn't sound degraded. It sounded like it didn't want to be translated. The coin woman, her name was Lila, I found out from a mutual friend, came by the hotel a week later to thank Maya for something I didn't catch. Maya told me Lila seemed lighter, like someone had done her a huge favor. She looked like she'd had a good night's sleep for the first time in months, Maya said. She slipped me a 20. I told her no and she insisted. She said balance. I haven't been back at night. I haven't been tempted because I felt the exact outline of how the ground under your feet can change shape. But sometimes walking home I hear the tap, tap, tap. I hear it in places where no one is standing, in the small space between tomb and path where only air can go. Once I heard it at my kitchen window at 1 a.m., soft and polite like a neighbor asking for sugar. Last week I woke up with a braid in my hair. I don't have hair that invites braids. I sleep like a dog chasing something, arms everywhere, blankets kicked to the floor. The braid was small and neat and ended in a knot so tight I had to cut it out. It didn't scare me right away. It annoyed me. I told myself it was some sleep quirk. Then I remembered what Maya said after the night in the cemetery, and I felt that wrong kind of cold, the one that starts at your wrists. I went to see Mr. Baptiste again. He was trimming rosemary that grows right up against a family tomb that smells like the sea. I asked him if there was a way to say, respectfully, "We're even now." He looked at me for a long time like he was weighing how much of the truth my face could carry. Then he said, "You live here now. Living here is an agreement." "What's the agreement?" I asked. "That when you ask, you pay. That when you pay, you don't forget. That you don't make fun. That you don't make a show. That you don't make a hole in yourself and then pretend you can't hear what it lets in." He looked down at my hands. I'd been fiddling with the saint charm Maya had left because she got a new one and told me to keep the old. He reached out and took it. For a moment I thought he was going to give it back to the Laveau tomb. Instead, he pressed it into the cracked mortar of a nameless vault beside the rosemary. Just for a second. Like you press a stamp pad. Then he handed it back. "Now it knows where it is," he said. "Now it knows you know. If this were a neat story, that would be the end." The braid would stop. The batteries would stay where I left them. The tapping would be just the old pipes, which in that building is a solid possibility. But it's not neat. 2 nights ago, another 3 taps at the door woke me up. It wasn't threatening. It was patient. I sat on the floor and leaned against the wood and realized I knew I wasn't going to open it. I also knew I wasn't going to move. I sat there and said thank you out loud, and then I paid under my breath in case whispering is a language the dead prefer. I fell asleep like that somehow. When I woke up, my back hurt, the way a back hurts when you're 35 and slept like a college kid. On the mat outside, someone had left a tiny twist of red thread. Not scary, not special. Something you'd find at the bottom of a drawer. The thread was tied in 3 knots. Underneath it, the chalk X's had been brushed into something like a sideways hourglass. I swept it in the morning. I went to work. I edited a boring podcast episode where a man talked about ergonomic chairs like he was saving lives. On my lunch break, I walked by the cemetery and watched tourists press their faces to the fence and lift their phones above it to get that 1 extra inch of view, that 1 extra layer of story to take home. The earth is always spitting up stories here. Maybe that's what keeps it green. There are a lot of places in New Orleans that feel like a stage. St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 is not one of them. It doesn't want your performance. It wants you to stand in the aisle with your shoulders down and ask for exactly what you mean, and then go home and pay. It wants your memory more than your money. I don't think any of that is supernatural. I think it's ugly and human and ongoing. People made deals when they were alive, and people make deals for them after. Maybe the ground here remembers better than most. I still record things. I haven't listened to that night's file again. It's there on my desktop with a name so ordinary it blends in, cemetery3mixdown.wav. Sometimes the icon shifts a pixel when my cursor gets near it, like it dodges me. That's obviously my eyes, my jittery trackpad static in the fabric of the day. I know that. But 3 days ago, I was walking past the gate and I saw Chris with a new group. He caught my eye and gave me a look like, "We're fine, we're professionals." He winked because that's how he survives the repetition of saying the same lines every day. I started to lift my hand back, friendly habit. That's when he dropped his keys. They hit the pavement and didn't bounce. They just landed flat like a coin selecting its answer. He didn't even notice. I kept walking. When I turned the corner, I felt something very light touch my shoulder, lighter than a moth, heavier than air, and move off, as if it was in a hurry to be somewhere else. I didn't turn around. I said out loud, "Thank you," because I have learned how to close a door with words. The taps still come sometimes. Always 3. Always polite. Always right when I've let my life tilt back into wanting too much. I sweep my porch in the morning. I keep chalk out of the house. I buy batteries in packs of 8. I tell people who visit to follow the rules, even if the rules sound like manners more than laws. And when I walk by the Laveau tomb during the day and see the X's messy and bright and completely unbalanced, I think about the hourglass and the thread, and the coin that stood on its edge for exactly 3 breaths. I think about business hours, and I keep my shoulder low and I don't announce myself and I try not to forget. Because I live here now. Because New Orleans is a city where the doors aren't all for the living. Because some debts get paid quickly, and some debts prefer to collect themselves softly with patient fingers, right when you start to think you've moved on. I don't tell people this part of the trip when they ask about Arizona. I tell them about the sky, how it turns the color of a bruise at sunset, and the steaks in the tourist shop where I bought a sunburned jackalope magnet. I don't tell them what happened at Boot Hill, because when you say a cemetery did something to me, people assume you're the kind of person who wants attention. I don't. I just want to sleep through the night again without hearing boots cross gravel that isn't there. This was 3 summers ago. Late August, the thin shoulder season in Tombstone when the reenactors are still out, but the weekend crowds thin after dinner. My friend Marco had convinced me to go. He runs a small podcast. Urban legends, local mysteries, the kind of thing you play when you're driving alone at 1 a.m. and want to spook yourself a little. It's not a big show, but he has a decent ear, and he's good at convincing people to open gates they don't normally open. In this case, that was the side gate at Boot Hill Cemetery. He'd emailed the Historical Society for weeks until a volunteer named Elaine said yes. Under conditions, we couldn't dig, move anything, or touch the markers, and we had to be out by sunrise. "We get coyote problems and 2-legged problems," she wrote. "I'm trusting you boys." The boys in question were me, Marco, and his cousin Rosa, who lives in Tucson, and offered us her couch and her old lady common sense. She's 32. Her common sense manifested as a tiny first aid kit and a knack for making people like her. She was the one who brought a small bag of peppermint candies for the nerves. I made fun of her for that and ended up eating half of them. We met Elaine at 7, when the desert light turned soft and Old West tragedies looked like they happened last week. She was in her 50s in a sun hat that had seen better days, with a stack of laminated maps under her arm. She had the kind of friendly exhaustion that comes from answering the same questions 100 times. "Boot Hill's for the ones who didn't die in bed," she said, leading us through the chain link. "A lot of these crosses aren't original. The originals were wood and they rotted. Some of the names we only know because some wife wrote a letter, or some bartender talked too much. Half of them don't have names at all." The wind cut through while she talked, moving in the dry ocotillo like someone riffling paper. The markers leaned at different angles. Some said murdered. Some had full names, dates, and what they did wrong, as if the ground wanted to keep score. It didn't feel spooky at first. It felt like what it was. A place where people had been put in the ground a long time ago with varying levels of ceremony. We set up the way we always do. Marco had 2 small field recorders with wind muffs, a cheap EMF reader that makes people roll their eyes, and a Nikon he'd borrowed from a coworker. I carried a handheld LED panel for light. Rosa took notes on index cards like she was in an old detective movie. As the sun went down, the cemetery passed from picture postcard to something that made you keep your hands out of your pockets so you could move faster if you had to. "What are you hoping to catch?" Elaine asked. "Voices, footsteps, a coin flipping, anything we can't explain," Marco said. We'll keep it respectful. Don't say their names like you know them, she said, more serious suddenly. Don't make deals. Don't answer questions you didn't hear. I'm sorry, what? I asked. It's a habit, she said, waving a hand at herself. I used to tell my grandkids that when they'd talk back to the TV. This place has a lot of one-sided conversations. She left at 8:30, promising to check the gate in the morning. We watched her taillights fold into the highway and then vanish. The silence after that was the heavy kind, not empty but full of things that don't make noise unless there's a reason. The first hour we just walked, letting our eyes adjust. The moon was a half coin stuck in a dark pocket. The lot below the cemetery was empty. Somewhere down slope, a few bars kept their neon lit and their laughs on low. We passed Margarita S. and Unknown and 2, Chinese. We stopped by a marker that said, John Heath, lynched? Rosa read the date under her breath and then didn't. Write it down. At 9:43, Rosa noted the time. I felt my left boot sink like I'd stepped on a sponge. The ground is loose there, little pebbles on hardpan, and sometimes your heel goes. But when I pulled my foot back, there was a clear outline. Not my boot. A boot that would have come to the ankle, narrow and pointed, with a heel like a tiny step. The kind you see in photos of men who didn't smile. It ran across my footprint and kept going, straight between 2 graves and out toward the fence. Marco, come look, I said. He swung the light and filmed. It's probably just someone earlier, he said. But he didn't finish it like a full thought. The print was fresh, edges crisp. No other prints matched it. We stood in a small wind that didn't fill anything. At 10, we set a recorder near the marker that said murdered with no name and sat on the low rock wall at the perimeter. Because that's where we could see the whole field and feel our back safe. Rosa passed the peppermints. The first coyote call came from far to the east and sounded manageable, like a radio on low in another room. Marco asked a few questions, the kind that make you feel silly. Is anyone here with us? And left long, respectful gaps. Nothing happened. The desert gave us the small, constant hiss of its own existence. Okay, Marco said at 10:45. I'm going to do a walk and talk, just me, down the center path. 20 minutes. Then we'll do the cross down near the Chinese cemetery. Stick to the main path, Rosa said. Ms. Elaine said watch out for off-trail holes. Marco laughed. Got it, Mom. He took the light and the camera and went, a dark shape with a little square of white leading the way. His footsteps made that dry, crunchy sound you could pick out of a crowd from a mile away. I could still see him when he reached the second bend and the light shifted. And then for a moment the light was blocked, like someone else had stepped between it and us. Hey, I said, standing half up. Hey dude, someone's... I see it, Rosa said, squinting. The light moved again and then stayed steady. It could have been a sway of the arm, an ocotillo branch in the foreground. When he turned and waved, the light made a soft pillar, and the thing we thought we saw wasn't there anymore. We didn't mention it when he came back. He didn't mention anything weird. He said some kind of, I don't know, maybe artillery shell? There's a casing by the fence. He held it up between thumb and forefinger. It was brass, dull with age, rimmed. 440 maybe? I'll put it back. Just wanted to show you. Rosa nodded. Yeah, put it back. He walked it to the fence line and set it down on the ground like he was handling a bird. I watched him do it. I watched the exact spot. At 11, we changed positions, moved the recorder, took some establishing shots, laughed softly so it wouldn't stick in my throat, drank warm water that tasted like whatever plastic becomes in the heat. A couple of cars went by on the highway and shone faint beams that reached the edge of the cemetery, and then shrugged and gave up. The air temperature dropped the way desert air does suddenly, the kind of chill that feels personal. At midnight, we called it the witching hour and rolled our eyes about it. People liked the word witching. We liked being the kind of people who said, let's not be dramatic, but kept the lights a little higher anyway. That was when Rosa asked if I could hear music. We stood still and listened. No coyotes, no cars. Somewhere downhill, one of the bars might have turned up a speaker. It wasn't a full melody, more like the idea of one. A few notes from a piano with 2 keys slightly out of tune. Paused, tried again. Maybe a radio in the parking lot of one of the motels. Maybe I was just hearing nothing and making it a shape. But when I said that, Rosa said no. It's there, and then, it's not this decade. Marco, who prides himself on being skeptical until the edit, said, it's probably some tour bus with a Bluetooth speaker. We're primed, right? Then, because he's never been able to resist doing the thing that scares him a little, he said, "Let's do the cross, the place where those men are supposed to walk." The cross is a path that splits in two and then rejoins, making a rough cross with the main path. The markers around it are the ones that make the teenage kids elbow each other. Billy Clanton, Frank McClory, names you've seen on television. Every town where something happened has one spot where people think the residue collects. Tombstone has 3. The cross at Boot Hill is one of them. We stood at the center. The wind went on a break. My teeth didn't chatter, but I became aware of them as objects, which is not a sensation I recommend. Marco set a recorder in the dirt and backed away, and then, he's done this for 3 years and he always flinches at this part, asked a ridiculous question. "If anyone wants to walk the path with us, you can. We don't want trouble. We're just listening." You could hear the blood move in my ears in the pause that followed. You could hear Rosa's breath go shallow because she was trying not to breathe loudly, and ended up breathing loudly. You could hear one pebble move somewhere to the left in a way that could have been anything. The first boot step was so clean it might as well have been put through a filter. Heel then toe, with the little rock scrape of a hard heel finding purchase. It came from behind us, not down the path, but from the space between 2 markers. Exactly where people don't walk because it's not the path and because even the worst tourist senses, you shouldn't cut there. It was one step, then another, a few feet to the left like someone adjusting their angle, then nothing. Marco didn't move. I didn't move. Rosa put her hand on my arm and held very steady. "Do not answer questions you didn't hear," she said under her breath like a spell, like a line she realized had been useful and didn't know why. We stood there with our heads full of old films, of men turning their bodies so their right hands hang a certain way. "Okay," Marco said after a full minute, his voice pitched a little higher like he was trying to sound nice to a neighbor. "We're going to walk down the path now. Feel free to. Stay where you are." And we did it. We walked without looking left. The light made a smeared yellow cone in front of us. I wanted to look so badly that my eyes watered from not doing it. We reached the end of the cross and nothing else happened. No gunshots, no shadows. When we turned around and swept the light, the only thing in the beam was the recorder blinking a soft red like a small heartbeat. We picked it up. The screen said it had caught 22 minutes. "Let's take 5, Marco said, which in Marco meant smoke a cigarette he's quit twice this year. He went to the rock wall again and I went with him, because if you're going to smoke in a cemetery at night, you shouldn't do it alone. Rosa stayed by the cross, writing something down by headlamp. The parking lot below was a silent black rectangle. "You saw where I put the casing," Marco said suddenly, as if continuing a conversation mid-sentence, "by the fence under that little crooked mesquite." "Yeah," I said. "You put it by the beer can ring pole." He blew smoke away from me. "It's on the recorder." "What?" "The casing. It's on the recorder. I felt something in my pocket a minute ago. I thought it was the gum. When I reached down just now to pick up the recorder at the cross, the casing slid out of my jacket pocket and landed on top of it, like it had already been balanced there. I didn't have an answer for that sounded like a grown-up who doesn't tell ghost stories. "Maybe it never left your pocket," I said. "I watched myself set it down," he said. We both looked at the fence line where he'd set it down, and saw exactly what you would expect to see. Dirt, scattered rocks, one lizard making itself 2-dimensional on a stone to keep heat. No casing. We called Rosa over and put the casing in the light. It was a little shorter than my index finger, tarnished black around the mouth. There was a dimple in the primer that looked like the lightest touch of a hammer. It didn't look new. It looked dug up. "What do we do?" Rosa asked. "Put it back," Marco said, and his voice was apologetic, like he was sorry he'd taken a cookie. He walked it to the fence line again and placed it under the mesquite. He kept his hand there for an extra second, flat like he was trying to feel a pulse. Then he stood. We gave it 20 minutes. We walked back to the cross. The casing lay on its side in the middle of the path. There were no prints leading to it. There were no prints leading away. I don't mean none we could see in the light. I mean none at all. Even our own were softened, more like suggestions. "Okay," Rosa said, speaking to the air, to the ground, to whatever category she needed to file this in. "We are not playing fetch. We are not doing any deals. We're sorry for disturbing you. We're going to leave that alone now." We didn't touch it again. We recorded the rest of the night around it, like circling a sleeping dog with its leash tucked under its chin. Around 1:30, A man's laugh came from somewhere behind us. Not creepy laughter, not a horror movie cackle. It was a tired laugh, like someone got told a joke they didn't quite understand and decided to be polite. It was close. "Hello?" I said, immediately breaking my resolve to be quiet. "Hello?" "Don't answer questions you didn't hear," Rosa whispered. "It wasn't a question," I said, like we were having a domestic argument in a cemetery. "It was an invitation," she said, and her voice had that same borrowed rhythm of Elaine's earlier, like she was quoting a rule she'd been asked to follow as a child. We stood very still and listened. The laugh didn't come again. In the camera mic, there's a faint static then that my brain wants to turn into breath. At 2-something, Rosa's notebook later said 2:12, we all heard the click. Imagine taking an empty revolver and easing the hammer back half a notch, not far enough to fire. A careful test to see if the thing is awake. That sound, it came from our left at about knee height. Marco put his hands up reflexively like "not me," which made me laugh despite myself. It sounded like the world correcting a tiny misalignment. I looked down and saw the casing again. Not in the path now, but on the recorder itself, which sat on a flat rock. It had been placed perfectly centered on the little red light, as if someone who didn't understand what a light was wanted to stop it from seeing. "Okay," Marco said, and his voice had lost its careful radio timbre and was just Marco now. "We're going to pack up. We did what people always say you shouldn't do. We hurried. We tried not to look hurried, but we hurried. We weren't running. Not because we were brave, but because you can't run in that light without breaking your neck. We zipped the recorders, wrapped the cords, swept the beam blindly as if the beam could pick out the kind of thing our eyes didn't know how to register. When we turned to leave, my shadow stretched long across a cluster of markers, and then another shadow moved across it at an angle that didn't match any of our bodies. We stopped again, because we were idiots. The other shadow wasn't a shadow. It was the absence of our light where it should have been, as if there were a person standing between the beam and the ground, and the person and his hat were simply neglected by illumination. It moved to the right very slowly, like someone taking their time to find their place in a photo. When it reached the edge of the beam, it didn't vanish so much as decide to not be there, and the ground reappeared without transition. The only sounds then were the small dry things that exist to make small dry sounds. In the car, Marco laughed too loudly, which is his other tell when he's actually rattled. He did the thing people do after a weird experience. He made it into a story with nice edges. "It's probably kids from town," he said, starting and starting again because his hand shook when he tried to put the key in. "Like with a remote speaker and a prop casing and fishing line, you know? Fishing line from the fence, you could put it on the recorder." "Fishing line would reflect," I said. "We would have seen it. And what teenager knows what a 4440 casing looks like?" "On YouTube," he said. "Everyone knows everything on YouTube." Rosa just watched the gate recede in the rear view like she expected it to move closer. When we got to the motel, the clock by the bed said 3:10 a.m. exactly. I slept in little edges. In one of them, Boots walked to the end of my bed and stopped and turned sideways like someone presenting their profile. I woke to the sound and there were no Boots, and the sound kept going for a second anyway, like a recording finishing itself. We checked out at 11 the next morning. The day was bright like a dare. We picked up coffee and sugar and went to meet Elaine at the gate. She had that look older people get when they want to check if your limbs are still attached without making you feel like a child. "How'd you do?" she asked. "We think some locals got us," Marco said. He's polite like that, trying to sand the edge off the thing. "We put a casing by the fence and it migrated a couple of times." "You put what by the fence?" she asked. He told her. She sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose, a gesture that had a lot of practice in it. "I told Len to police the grounds for those. Folks like to leave them. They come to town for the gun thing. They don't realize they're dropping junk on graves. I'll go look in a bit." We didn't mention the shadow that wasn't. We didn't say the time. I didn't say I kept feeling like my shoes were on the wrong feet and then checking and finding them fine. We said thank you and we left. That's the right thing to do in a town that organizes its history for your comfort. You say thank you and you don't give them another story to deal with. We drove back to Tucson and slept hard and didn't talk about it. I flew home the next day. The casing came home with me. I didn't know that then because I didn't take it. I made a point of not taking it. But when I unpacked in my apartment, there it was in the pocket of the jacket I'd worn. I stood in my city kitchen with a piece of Arizona in my hand and didn't know where to put my eyes. I texted Marco a photo and said, "You messing with me?" He wrote back, "Dude, no. I checked my bag for it this morning because I thought maybe I did something dumb in the dark. It wasn't there. I drove it to a park and threw it in a trash can by the dog waste station because my brain decided that's what you do to neutralize a thing. Mix it with daily trash, diapers, dog bags, anonymous and boring. That night I woke up to the clink of metal on wood and found it on my kitchen table, exactly in the center of a ring it had left in a faint circle of dust like it had sat there for years, and I moved in. That's the joke I tell when I don't want to tell the real part. I didn't move. I picked it up and put it on the bookshelf behind some paperbacks and did my best to forget it. A week later, Marco sent me our Boot Hill audio. He'd cut it together into a rough. "Tell me if you hear the piano," his email said. "I'm not putting that in the episode if it's just crosstalk." I put on headphones. The Boot Hill track begins with gravel and wind and our voices acting like no one can hear them. You hear the first hour and the nothing in it, and then, under a question of Marco's about whether anyone would like to talk, you hear 3 quiet notes that don't match our century. You hear my breathing hitch the way it hitches when I lie. At 12:38, a man laughs politely from nowhere. At 2:12, something clicks. At 3:10 a.m., exactly. When we'd already left, the recorder we left on the rock for ambient captures voices. Not words exactly, like voices in the next room. But if you slow it down and pick at the noise the way Marco can, you get fragments that make the hair on the back of your neck go cautious. You get stand, you get take your time. You get my name said in a voice I don't use, like someone imagining how I would have sounded if I'd been born with tobacco under my tongue. And this part, which I don't want to write, but people ask where the line is and I have to put the line somewhere. You get the role of 2 names that aren't ours. One of them a name that's on a marker. At Boot Hill with murdered under it, and then you get my surname like a marshal trying to remember who made bail. We didn't put it in the episode. The episode is all wind and distant bars and our graceful dance around saying nothing happened. People liked it anyway. They liked the open space it left in their evening. 2 weeks after, Rosa mailed me a postcard with a saguaro on it. On the back, in her tidy block letters, it said, "I've been hearing that piano. Not always. In the shower and when I boil water. Peppermints don't help." I think we were counted. She drew a little box and put 3 dots in it and then a smaller dot a little away, as if drawing the path in the place where someone stood too near. I kept the casing on the shelf for a month. It moved, not a lot. I would set it behind the paperbacks and find it on top of them. I would put it inside a mug and find it on the saucer beside it. It never moved in front of me. It never made a sound doing it. It didn't turn up in my bed or on my pillow like in a movie. It is not a jump scare kind of object. It is an I was here kind. I tried to get rid of it again because that's what this story wants to hear, that you can dispose of a thing and dispose of the feeling. I put it in a donation bag and dropped it at a thrift store 2 neighborhoods away. I got a receipt. The woman at the counter wrote miscellaneous in blue marker, and the ink bled into the paper like a wound. The next morning it was in my jacket pocket again, warm like a coin. I hadn't worn the jacket that day. Here's the part that makes it a Boot Hill story and not just a me in a haunted casing story. I called Elaine. I still had her number from the arrangements. When she picked up, I said my name and she was quiet long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then she said, "You boys left the gate closed, thank you, and is everything all right?" I told her about the casing. I left out the shadow. I left out my name on the recorder. I told her it kept coming back to me. I expected her to tell me to get a priest, to burn sage, to stop calling volunteers with my personal problems. She said, "What time did you see your clock when you got back to your room?" 3:10, I said, and felt stupid until she said, "They walked a fellow out of town at that time once." It wasn't the big famous one. It was a smaller one that didn't make it into the dramatizations. I mention it sometimes on the tour if the group looks like the type to care. They walked him under the moon because the deputy didn't want to do it at noon and make it a spectacle. They wanted it quiet. People remember the loud things. The quiet ones are the ones that keep the books. He was buried at Boot Hill? I asked. They all were one way or another, she said. Sometimes I think the ones with little to no words on their stones are the ones who think they still have something to say. Sometimes I think it's just wind and stones and us making stories. Both things can be true. Bring it back if you can. If you can't, keep it where it is. That's what I've done. It's behind me as I type this, tucked between two books that don't have anything to do with Arizona. It has not moved for 3 months. Or it has, and it returned to the exact groove in the dust where it was, which is a kind of mercy, because you can live with a thing as long as it doesn't announce itself. Sometimes late, I play the raw audio from that night, and I put it through basic filters like Marco taught me, and I listen for the piano. I don't always hear it. When I do, it tastes like peppermint in the back of my throat. The smell, I mean mint and dust and the faint copper scent you get when you hold a coin too long. I try not to think of the shadow moving across my shadow. A man proving to himself he can still get to the right place at the right time, that he still remembers how to stand. People ask if I'll go back to Tombstone, and I say sure, because it's easier to say that than to say, I don't think I'm the one who would be going back. I think a version of me is already there, standing at the cross with his head turned to the side, listening to a laugh that is polite and patient and has all the time in the world. Last week, when New York did its brief impression of Arizona and a hot wind pushed up 6th Avenue, I heard boots on the gravel that doesn't exist here. It was one step, then another 5 feet to my left. I didn't answer any questions I didn't hear. I kept walking. I passed a bar where someone had a piano patch pulled up on a cheap keyboard and was trying to find a tune with 2 keys slightly out of tune. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself it was everything. I reached into my pocket to touch the casing without looking at it, the way you reach for your keys when you want to know you can get home, and my fingertip met air. I got home anyway. The jacket is on the chair. The books are on the shelf. There is a faint circle in the dust where something used to sit and may still be sitting somewhere else. Maybe in the pocket of a man who was walked out of town at 3:10 a.m. one muted night. Maybe under a mesquite at the fence line. Maybe in a thrift store bin between a cracked mug that says "World's Okayest Dad" and a plastic sheriff's badge for a kid who will grow up and learn that some titles don't protect you from anything. If you listen hard enough in the right kind of quiet, you can make anything into a story. If you stand in the wrong place at the right time, the story makes you. Boot Hill is still there. The wind moves like it has always moved. The markers lean. A tourist bends to read a name and feels their heel sink into something softer than dirt for a fraction of a second, and then it's firm again. They stand up fast, embarrassed, and don't tell anyone. In the distance, someone laughs politely at a joke we didn't hear. The rest is atmosphere. Or it's not. I'm not the one who gets to decide, and that's the worst and best part. That some nights, without asking, you're counted.